evening. Welcome to the September 1st meeting of the Town Council. First, I'd just ask everyone, please silence your device. You might think you have, but check anyway. And then we'll start with our roll call.
Thank you and good evening. Councilmember Mariko Sayak.
Here.
Councilmember Steve Leonardis.
Here.
Councilmember Rob Rennie.
Here.
Vice Mayor Barbara Spector.
Here.
Mayor and Chair Marcia Jensen.
Here. And then we're going to start, as we always do after our roll call, with our Pledge of Allegiance. And I'd like to invite up Isabel Chu. Isabel. Come on, not yet. That's after. We try to get these stage directions right. It's difficult sometimes. Come on up, where everyone can see you. Isabel is an 8th grader at Basis Independent School. I hadn't heard of it, so I asked her what it is. It's a private school that's new to the Silicon Valley. She's been a student at Challenger, and she wanted to change. And she's been inspired by their program and the way they put emphasis on students. She told me that they even let students have input into selecting their teachers, so you teachers out there. But she's been very inspired by it and is doing great in school, but I didn't really think that was a problem. Looking at her resume, she enjoys reading, writing, math, science, volleyball, art, music, writing. She's won 2 6th grade awards at Challenger for her art and her writing. She is also a musician who's played in community orchestras for the community. She plays violin and piano. I'm partial to piano, but she likes violin better. I asked her, tell me something interesting about you. Do you have a pet? She said, I'm not interesting. And I said, well, of course you're interesting. But she has a goldfish. And if any of you have ever had goldfish, you know that they don't have a really good life expectancy. So she said one of them's still alive, but the other one died. But I think that you've got a really good track record there. So, Isabel, why don't you lead us in the pledge? And please stand and join in as well.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Isabel. Let's have a round of applause for Isabel. And once more for Isabel as she sits down. Thank you, Isabel. Now, closed session report, Mr. Schultz.
Yes, good evening. Prior to tonight's regular session, Councilman, in closed session to discuss real property negotiations. The council discussed various properties owned by the town that could be sold or put up for lease. No action was taken regarding these properties that requires reporting under the Brown Act.
Thank you. And now it's time for council member matters. This is a time when we report to you and to each other regarding activities, meetings, committees, or anything that we have undertaken between our last meeting and tonight on behalf of the town of Los Gatos, or that may be of interest to each other and to the community. So we'll start with Councilman Rennie.
I have nothing to report.
Vice Mayor?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Since the last meeting, we've had a council policy committee meeting along with the mayor.
And I attended a West Valley Mayor's meeting where we discussed, among other things, various issues with respect to transportation and traffic and Route 85. Councilman Leonardis.
I have nothing to report this week.
Councilwoman Sayak.
Since we last met informally, West Valley representatives to ABAG, the Association of Bay Area Governments, met to discuss upcoming proposed changes that may affect us. Nothing significant was discussed other than future coordination.
Okay, thank you. Manager matters. Is there anything to report this evening?
Nothing.
Thank you. Now we come to the part of our agenda which is the consent item. And there was, at our last meeting, a little bit of confusion about this, so I'm going to explain it with a little bit painstakingly. There are several items that are contained on our consent calendar. Tonight there are 4. And what we do on the consent calendar is we determine what these items are. The council has staff reports. They're available to the public. They can be a public hearing if someone pulls it from the item. You don't necessarily need to disagree with it in order to pull it. It's just something if you might want to discuss it. However, they've been identified as things that are generally non-controversial or are routine, and so they can be acted upon in a single motion. Once the consent calendar, the council takes action on the consent calendar, those items that are approved on the consent calendar are finished, and there's no public discussion of them. They just get approved as a group on the consent calendar. So I just want to make clear what that is and what we would do. Does any member of the council wish to pull any of the 4 items from the consent calendar? Okay, seeing no one. Anyone from the audience wish to pull an item from the consent calendar? Okay, I'll look to the council then for a motion on the consent calendar. Councilwoman Sayoc?
Okay, I move to approve items 1, 2, 3, and 4 on the consent calendar.
Is there a second? Councilman Leonardis?
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None. It passes unanimously. So our consent calendar is passed. And I will say that one of the items on our consent calendar tonight was the agreement to appoint our new town manager, and that's Ms. Laurel Provetti, who's now sitting with us in the town manager slot. So I want to say congratulations, Laurel. Welcome. We're excited to have you be joining us tonight and in the future. And by welcoming you, I'm also going to thank, I shouldn't say this because this is what you say to a juror that you're not going to select anymore, thank and excuse Mr. White, but that's not really what I mean, but I know that you're going to be leaving us for tonight's meeting and returning on the 15th as a senior advisor and as needed for the town. And on behalf of the council, I want to thank you for all the help that you have given us and the guidance that you've given us over the past many months in serving as our interim manager. So, Mr. White, thank you.
Well, I'm going to leave you now, and I'm going to leave because you really only have room for one town manager, and she's the real thing. I want to thank the council. You're a very bright group, dedicated group. It's one of the better councils that I've been around. You should be proud of yourself and be proud of the people that are behind me. They work very hard to try to achieve the high expectations of the council, and I think they do a good job, and they're continuing to work to do a good job. And they're going to have just a really first-rate person as the town manager with whom they can work. I have the greatest confidence in Laurel. In many respects, I wish I had more of her qualities, and a little bit of respect, I wish she'd be more bombastic like me, but hey, we can't all be perfect, huh? So thank you for the opportunity.
Mr. White, thank you. And we'll give you an opportunity to excuse yourself, and then we'll go on with our meeting. Which brings us to item number 5, which is introduction and first reading of an ordinance adding section 25.60 to the code of the town of Los Gatos with respect to school funding and fees. And this is rather a complicated matter. So, Mr. Schultz, will you advise us precisely what we're doing tonight and or expected to be discussing and all the ramifications for it?
Sure. Good evening, Mayor and Council. So it's a two-step process, and the first process for tonight is really just establishing a mechanism that's been requested by the school district. So before you tonight is the introduction and first reading of an ordinance adding a section to our municipal code related to a fee dedication for interim school facilities. Government Code Section 65970, et sec, permits the town to impose additional fees on residential developments to pay for interim facilities to alleviate the impact of overcrowding in schools caused by new development. On April 17th of this year, we received a notification from the Los Gatos Unified School District that it had evaluated proposed new development that could occur within the town and determined that new residential development will cause additional overcrowding in its schools and that no other feasible mitigations are available to reduce that overcrowding. So the first step is what prior to that. So what the district requested was that the town adopt an ordinance, because we didn't have an ordinance already on our books that would allow for this mechanism under the government code. It also asked us to concur with those findings that there was overcrowding, and then to establish a fee of $9.62 per square foot. But the three steps that I just mentioned, the one tonight is only for the ordinance, and the two others, whether to concur or not to concur in the overcrowding and to establish those fees, would happen at the September 15th meeting. So again, the first step is that adoption of the ordinance, which is tonight, which is the introduction of that ordinance. The proposed ordinance that is attached to the staff report is standard in almost all municipalities throughout the state. There is one exception that the staff has added that was not, you wouldn't find in many of the standard ordinances, and that is we added as an exception to this ordinance would be second unit dwellings. Staff's recommendation for including that is because of the low or no impact involved with secondary dwelling units, and also our strategic goals and need to have more secondary dwelling units to meet our RENA numbers. There are a couple minor changes that I caught after the staff report went out to our ordinances. On page 4, 5, and 6 of the ordinance, the references to section 16 should be changed to 25. When I was doing the ordinance, I thought I was going to stick it in section 16, but I think 25 was a better place to put it, but I didn't catch that. So that's one need you'll make to, if you do make a motion to introduce it tonight, is to make that change. The other issue that council should address tonight is under Government Code Section 76971, there is a requirement that this matter be heard within 150 days. The code specifically says that if you don't do it in 150 days, it doesn't deem that you concur or do not concur or not concur with the school district. But I think we should still, under the code, you're allowed to request an extra 30 days. So when you do make your motion to introduce the ordinance, another motion would be to continue to extend that period to respond from 150 days for an additional 30 days to allow us time past September 14th. So after tonight's introduction and first reading of the ordinance, if that goes forward, which I recommend, regardless of what you would do on the 15th, this would be an ordinance that would be on our books. For example, if in fact on the 15th you don't concur with the school district that they've met the findings necessary or that they're not allowed, it would still allow for this ordinance to be on the municipal code in case they came back at a later date or another school district came back to try to use this section. And I think that's pretty much it. I will mention the council did receive a 20-page letter from BIA this afternoon. I had a brief time to review that, and there are concerns raised on that, on whether they're entitled, the school district is entitled to these extra fees. But again, that would be the subject matter on the 15th when we discuss whether to concur or not concur in the findings that the school district has made. And with that, I'll turn it back to you, Mayor.
Thank you. I would normally give the audience a talk about how we're going to proceed with public hearings, but I'm just going to, on this one, I'll save that a little bit, but I'm going to let the council ask procedural questions of Mr. Schultz, because I'm sure there are many. Vice Mayor Spector.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just clarification from Mr. Schultz that there are other jurisdictions in the state of California that assess 65970 fees, even after, even after the Prop 50, I guess it was.
That's the issue that still needs to be decided and would come back on the 15th. It's still as a government code and still is allowed. The question is are there ones out there that are using both SB 50 and the interim facilities fees, and how that coexists amongst themselves? So I'm still trying to research and find out where there are other towns and cities that do allow the assessment of both.
All right, thank you. And Madam Mayor, just wanted to clarify that verbal communications will come after agenda item 5?
I'm sorry. Yes, I don't have any cards for verbal communications, but yes, we'll do that.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Other questions for Mr. Schultz? Councilwoman Saya.
Just another procedural question, Ms. Mayor. So given the research that you will conduct and report back on September 15th, there is nothing in the draft ordinance that we have before us that requires us to wait until your research is concluded?
No, there's nothing that would.
Okay.
And in fact, if something concluded that, that this section completely has been eliminated because of the SB 50, then my recommendation would be we don't do the second reading.
Councilman Leonard's.
Thank you, Mayor Jensen. Mr. Schultz, there was some correspondence received about the North 40 project. If these fees are someday enacted, would it be applicable to that project or any projects that are currently in the pipeline?
So that's a good question. The ordinance that's in front of you has a section that deals specifically with agreements that are entered into. So in this case with the North 40, no, they have a separate agreement to already pay above and beyond the SB 50 and was to take care of these interim facility fees. So they would not be subject because they're already paying that per agreement with the school district.
Thank you.
Okay, I have a couple questions, I think, just to make sure. The ordinance that's being proposed is, as I understand it, basically mirroring the state law with respect to interim school facilities. Okay, so I understand interim school facilities to be just that, essentially portable classrooms that go up for a number of years by the state law and then have to be taken down. Am I right about that?
So there is a section under the code that I did in the addendum that talks about that. And interim facilities, as you just mentioned, are temporary classrooms not constructed with a permanent foundation. Let's see, number 2 is temporary classrooms, reasonable site preparation, it can be for that. But 4th is land necessary for the placement thereon of any of the facilities listed above. It's the schools district's position that they can use these funds for the acquisition of land and that didn't have a requirement of temporary. Because how could, I mean, once you purchase land, it's pretty much to make it temporary. That's an issue that will come back on the 15th for clarification, and you'll need to confer in that logic from the school district or not confer with that.
Okay, and I just want to follow up with my questions, and then I'll call on the Vice Mayor. My reading of the state law that you gave us was that the purchase of land was limited to an amount that would allow for the construction of interim facilities, not enough for an ultimate school site. Am I right about my reading of that?
So in an earlier section, not under the definition of interim facilities, it does talk about that the fee shall not exceed 5 lease payments if there's a dedication of fees.
Okay.
So it's in the interrelationship between those is certainly a concern to me, but I think that'll be fleshed out on the 15th as opposed to just enacting an ordinance that conforms with state law.
Okay, and one final question. If the town were to determine that it was going to adopt tonight this ordinance, we wouldn't have the second reading if it was in conflict with SB 50, but this ordinance would be intended to allow imposition of some other and different fees for the construction of interim facilities, correct? Okay. Vice Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. It's just, it's still a little confusing to me. This is going to, if it were to pass, this would be a mandate on the town. This would be our ordinance, correct? So if it's a mandate on the town to assess fees on development, then how do we interface with the school district or other entities that say, oh, not on this development, you don't do it on this one, when the ordinance is to assess fees on development?
So the assessment of the fees only occurs after a school district has made certain findings that they're of overcrowdedness and that they bring that notice to you, and then you can concur with or without those findings. Once that's done, then the mechanism is there that allows for us to begin collecting those fees and turning them over to the school district. It doesn't just happen automatically on to all development. It wouldn't happen in other school district areas. It would only happen in the if you agreed, only in the Los Gatos Union School District. Another school district would have to come forward before we would assess development in that school district area. If in fact, let's suppose, the development's going through, one of the conditions would be that they have to, once, if this was established, would have to pay that extra school impact fee unless there was an agreement already provided between the developer and the school district. So they're able to enter in their own agreement and not have to pay this fee, and that's allowed under the government code section.
And again, it's the process that is a little bit confusing to me. So let's say this ordinance was passed at our next meeting on September 15th, and then the North 40 or some other development comes forward because we don't actually have the development yet. The development comes forward, and under the ordinance, these fees would be assessed. It would be ordinance mandating the fee assessment to be implemented by the town. So how do we not do it? I mean, does the school district come forward and say, don't do it now?
Right. So the agreement would say prior to the issuance of building permits, if the conditional use permit or the whatever permit is issued would say that condition would be prior to the issuance of building permits, the applicant will pay the amount of whatever that amount is for school impact fees unless other arrangements have been made. And they would have to prove those other arrangements were made, school district signing off on it, or else pay the amount.
Thank you.
Other questions? Okay. So for this and other public hearings that we do tonight, there will be a presentation by a staff member. Council can then ask procedural questions that are important to their understanding of the matter before the public talks. Then if you'd like to speak on any item on the agenda, this one's number 5, there are these cards that are in the bench backs in the audience. You fill them out with your name, and then I call you. You get 3 minutes to talk. When you come up, you'll see lights that are on the podium. Green means you're fine, yellow means you have 30 seconds, and red means you're done. And I will politely indicate to you that you are done. You may have council questions, so once your time is up, wait just a second to make sure there's no questions for you before you take a seat. I will then, when everyone's done talking, close the public hearing, and then the council will have a discussion that will hopefully result in a motion. And that will be how we proceed on all of the matters before us tonight. So the first card I have on item number 5, the school fees, is Diana Abadi.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor, Town Council, and staff. I'm Superintendent Diana Abadi, and with me this evening is Assistant Superintendent Martin Fregosa. We are here tonight to speak to you regarding the views of the Los Gatos Union School District in support of the ordinance as a mechanism to address the overcrowding of our schools, of our K-8 schools. Specifically, we would like to provide more information regarding questions number 3 and number 4 on the addendum provided by Town Attorney Rob Schultz, and Mr. Schultz and I had a conversation this afternoon. So regarding question number 3, our legal interpretation of Government Code Section 65980 provides that these additional fees can be used for the acquisition of land as well as interim facilities as stated in addendum 4, in the addendum that was provided. Regarding question number 4, I'm going to have Martin Fregosa answer that one.
Our understanding is that we could use these proposed fees for land acquisition. And so the analysis was based on acquiring 6 acres of land to house 305 students. So at a cost of approximately $3.1 million per acre, which comes out to be about $19 million. So this is based strictly on new growth of new housing, new development that we know of. It does not include, smaller developments that we have no clue about. So that's how we came about the proposed fee structure.
So any new money generated by this proposed ordinance will be used to address the overcrowding. Without these fees, the district will need to pass a future bond measure at approximately $50 million to build a new school to house the additional students. Therefore, we urge the Town Council to approve the introduction and first reading of the ordinance, since new residential development will continue to cause overcrowding, and there are no other feasible mitigations available to reduce the overcrowding. We're also here to answer any questions you have regarding the notice of findings for overcrowding. Thank you.
Questions for Ms. Abadi? Thank you very much. Leanne Marcelin? And company, and you can and you can introduce who you have with you.
We're coming up in a herd, excuse us. Good evening, council members. My name is Leanne Marcelin, and I'm president of the Los Gatos Union School District Board of Trustees. And on behalf of all the trustees, I just want to thank you for considering the adoption of mitigation fees to relieve the overcrowded conditions of our schools. And we all just wanted to come up tonight, and I'd like to introduce my fellow board members. Alex Potts, our newest board member, Mani Farhadi, behind me, Emmy Eto, and Peter Neumer. As you would expect, we've been struggling with the overcrowded conditions of our schools for quite some time now. So when we discovered that the School Facilities Act might give us an opening to try to alleviate those conditions, we were excited to find that out. And so again, we're just very happy that you're going to consider this ordinance tonight, and we're all here in support of the ordinance. And finally, I would just say that when you think about the growth of this school district, in 2006, 2007, we only had about 2,500 students. And now we have over 3,300 with another 300 coming. So it's just changed our schools immensely, and unfortunately not for the better. So again, thank you very much for your consideration of this matter tonight.
Questions? Thank you very much. Thank you all for coming. I have a card from someone who is only listed as Dennis, who is the BIA representative. Sir, if you could give us your last name as well, we'd appreciate it.
Mayor and Council, I'm Dennis Martin, speaking on behalf of BIA Bay Area, and I'm here tonight to register the building industry's 100% objection and opposition to the adoption of this impact fee ordinance that is proposing to levy a fee in the amount of $9.57 a square foot for the benefit of the Los Gatos Union School District under School Facilities Act of 1977, referred to as SB 201 or the 1977 Act. And I call your attention to our letter and legal analysis co-authored by Nick Camerata, General Counsel of CBIA, and Paul Campos, General Counsel of BIA Bay Area. The flawed process being utilized here is a blatant attempt to end run around SB 50, the 1998 School Facilities Program Act, which supersedes the old SB 201, the act being utilized here, temporary facilities fees legislation, and to evade the clear school mitigation limitations imposed by SB 50. BIA admonishes you in the strongest possible terms not to adopt this flawed ordinance, but to instead reject the district's request, adopt a resolution of non-concurrence, and terminate all further proceedings under the 1977 Act. Contrary to the district representations to the town, the 1977 Act does not authorize the town to impose any fee or other exaction on new residential development for the purpose of providing school facilities in an amount that exceeds the statutory cap established by the legislature in SB 50. Nor does SB 50 permit the town to deny, refuse, to approve development approvals, or even consider the adequacy of school facilities in exercising its local police powers related to planning, zoning, and development in the manner the district proposes. Indeed, so encompassing is SB 50's exemption in these fields that it expressly prohibits a city from considering the adequacy of school facilities under CEQA and from refusing to approve a land use approval on the basis of inadequate school facilities, even if circumstances otherwise suggest. BIA views the process that the district and the city are engaging in as not viable, and that the maximum amount that can be levied under any legal authority is set under SB 50 at $2.29 a square foot. The Los Gatos Union School District's actual fee proposal is even way beyond the bounds of the 1977 Act, as it is based on unconstrained site acquisition, site development, and construction costs for a permanent school. It is particularly important to note that the 77 statute itself is only supposed to be for temporary facilities, and that the requirement of showing cost for temporary facilities and where they're going for each school, etc., is not being followed in this analysis. As to the draft city ordinance, it appears that the city attorney has adopted old 1977 Act ordinances on the books in other cities. However, the school district's actual proposal and analysis is not at all constrained, even by the terms of the 77 Act, which we believe is in fatal conflict with SB 50.
Mr. Martin,
and can't be
that is your red
implemented as
light.
written.
So why don't you wrap up your thoughts? You probably have questions.
Well, for all the foregoing reasons, we urge the town in strong terms to reject the district's request and instead adopt a resolution of non-concurrence in the district's notice of findings as soon as practicable before September 14, 2015, and to terminate all further proceedings under the 1977 Act.
Thank you. You have a question, Vice Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Mr. Martin, to your knowledge, is there any jurisdiction in California that has been assessing 65970 fees since the enactment of SB 50?
Not to my knowledge.
Thank you.
I have a question for you. My not educated and not complete reading of SB 50, you say we are limited to $229 per square foot. I thought I had read in SB 50 that there is a mechanism for jurisdictions to come forward under that bill and actually raise those fees. What's your knowledge about that?
Well, there is a tiered fee level, but LGUSD is not at that level. LGUSD is at level 1 fees, and there is a process by which the school district can go through and the SB 50, but not under SB 201.
So that's my question. I want to make sure I understood you that under SB 50, the school district can go through a process to raise those fees, correct?
But they must.
I understand that they're not
Let's go
doing that
under
here,
SB
but they
50.
can, right?
Yes, I believe so.
Thank you. Other questions? Councilwoman Sayoc.
So I understand your position, and as you heard our town attorney say, we'll get into the legalities and more research and conclusion will come at our next meeting. What I do want to ask is, do you have specific issues or evidence that refute the findings of overcrowding that was presented?
Well, the school district itself states that the rise in school in school attendance or school numbers is not due to new housing whatsoever. It's due to other factors entirely. Additionally, the school district has spent over $14 million in building a sports facility at Fisher, where that money could have been used to acquire land and to provide for the construction of new classrooms, if that's what they think was the priority.
Other questions for Mr. Martin? Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Those are all the cards I have on this matter. I look out in the audience and I see many of you that may be interested. That now is your opportunity to talk if you wish to do so. Seeing no one, I'm going to close the public hearing and look to the council for any additional questions they might have of Mr. Schultz, comments or a motion. Okay. Councilman Leonardis.
Thank you, Mayor Jensen. Mr. Schultz, obviously this primarily just addresses the Los Gatos Union School District. Have there been other school districts in our community that have come forward with similar proposals? And if they were to, this ordinance would not be applicable to them?
First question is no, we don't have any other requests, and no, it would be applicable to them. This is really just setting up a mechanism to allow for a school district to try to be able to assess fees under the 1977 Act, as was mentioned.
Thank you.
Other questions? I have a question. In your initial report to us, I guess there's two questions. You indicated that the council could take an action to extend the time that we have to consider this. And my question goes to, you had indicated, well, there's issues that are raised by the BIA letter that we got this afternoon, the 20-page letter. And so my question is, well, can we use that mechanism to extend the time for consideration of the process before we take an action about a first reading of an ordinance so that we can get answers to those questions? Or do we need to do that now and then extend it further?
So you certainly can do that. Under the ordinance requirements, you have to have a first reading and introduction, and then you actually have the adoption. So tonight, you're not even doing the adoption to begin with. So even if you were to make the motion for the introduction and first reading, and the analysis came back and agreed with BIA, simply then we wouldn't adopt the ordinance and it would never be implemented. If you wait and not do anything tonight and just extend it for the additional 30 days from September 15th, that'll give us till October 15th. We could have the first reading and still get it done. So you certainly could have that as an option of just extending it for the 30 days and not doing anything else tonight. It was more to keep it moving and making certain that we were taking steps to get to where we need to get if, in fact, the school district's interpretation is correct.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to make sure that we knew what our alternatives were.
You could really do both.
Councilwoman Sayak.
Thank you. Just to follow up to Council Leonardis' question, the ordinance that is being proposed today is a template so that if other school districts would also like to submit their own applications for overcrowding, they may do so, but it's at their initiation, correct?
Correct. And that's the example I used, even using the Los Gatos Union School District is if in 2 weeks the council did not concur because of the fact that they felt that they were using permanent land facilities instead of temporary facilities, or did not concur in the fact that that the overcrowding was caused by development, some of the arguments made by BIA, they could certainly then go back to the drawing board and try to come up with other findings in a different dollar amount and present that again, just as any other school district could. So it's more of a mechanism to allow it, because right now we don't have any ordinance that allows for that mechanism.
Other questions? Okay, I have a follow-up to Councilwoman Sayak's questions, then I'll get back to you. Councilwoman Sayak asked if other school districts could introduce a similar thing. It's my understanding that they could, but they'd have to go through the process of making those findings, correct?
Yes, they'd go through those findings and they would have to come forward to you, and then we wouldn't have an ordinance that was coming in front of you. It would just be a resolution whether to concur or not to concur with those findings.
Thank you. Councilwoman Sayak.
And this is another question, and I'm not sure if you'll be able to answer it, if I should have asked it of Superintendent Abadi. But my understanding with this application is that it was not only findings to us as the town council, but there were other findings that needed to be made to the Department of Education, I'm assuming?
Oh, I don't know about elsewhere.
But
I thought you meant with us, there's other findings, not just concurring with them, but findings that it's consistent with our general plan, and a couple other different findings that you'll have to make separate and apart.
And with those separate findings specific to the general plan, that would also happen on the 15th?
Yes.
Or would that
No,
be
no, that happens on the 15th also.
Okay. Okay.
Other questions? Councilman Rennie.
Thank you, Mayor Jensen. So my question is, as I listen, I'm getting a little confused. So you've presented us with a template ordinance, which I guess I thought came from someplace, but then you've also, I think I'm hearing, haven't yet found any place where it was used. So I'm trying to understand, where did this template come from?
I would say there's 350 cities. I would say probably half the cities in California have this ordinance on their books, very similar. Some of their ordinance specifically put in the amount of the fee. I'm not sure why you would do that, because that could vary from school district to school district. Maybe it was a town that had just one school district, and that's why they did it, as opposed to us that have 3 or 4, and they could all be different fees. So they're on the legally code sections that have been passed and that are available for entities to act upon. They have not been repealed. It's the BIA's position that SB 50 circumvents all of those and doesn't allow for any fees under this section of the code. But it's still a state code that hasn't been repealed either. So the question is whether BIA's argument is correct or not. And we got that letter today, so I really need to analyze that. I didn't look into other towns and cities that are actually collecting both the SB 50 fee and then the fee under this act. So it's some more research that I can bring back and see if that's happening.
Follow up? So I think what you're saying is, what I'm hearing you say is a lot of towns and cities have passed this before SB 50, but you don't know whether any have passed this ordinance since
No,
then.
there's been some since.
Okay, but you don't also know whether they're collecting fees under it.
Yeah. In my research, I found a very difficult time finding any that had done it in the last, probably since 2000. So that raised some red flags with me on whether it is or is not preempted by SB 50.
Vice Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Mr. Schultz, you mentioned that there would be other findings, and so for me, if this comes back to us, if you could have the other findings specifically identified and delineated. And then a question. The school district has done its analysis and has reached its conclusions about its factual basis and that what it needs based on that factual analysis. It's not clear to me whether or not this council is being asked to adopt the findings made by the school district, or if we are saying we agree with those findings. I don't know if the distinction is different. Are we saying that's the findings the school district made, and so that's what we're agreeing to, that they made them? Or are we also saying that we, council, have reached the same conclusions independently?
You've reached the same conclusion. It's concur. It's not adopt, but it's that you concur with them. So you are agreeing with the findings they made and that they're adequate.
Okay, I have before I call on Councilwoman Sayak, just to go back again, beat a dead horse on procedurally. The recommendation that we have before us tonight is to accept public comment and move for introduction and first reading of the ordinance that we have in our staff report by title only, i.e., an ordinance that's going to potentially allow collection of interim fees. And my question is that a procedural placeholder for future action on September 15th or some other time? Because it strikes me that there's a lot of questions about how this might work. And I'm wondering, do we have to read a title and just to say this is something under consideration? Or can we say, okay, we move under the act to extend the time period for this and maybe we'll do it? So I'm just trying to figure out what are we obligated to if we say, here's the title? How do we get penalized if we don't say that? I'm just trying to understand procedurally.
So one of the questions you ask is the 30 days. So if you move to extend the deadline, that would give us until October 14th. Again, though, the code says if you don't finish it within that timeline, there's no automatic concurrence. But still, if to meet that deadline, we continue it and move for the 30 days. You'll have until the October 6th meeting to complete the 2 public hearings. So you could have your introduction at the next meeting instead of this one, and on the October 6th. It's just putting off one more. The big requirement with the introduction and first reading is it's just an introduction and first reading. It's not the adoption of the ordinance. There's many times when an ordinance is introduced for first reading, and then it comes for adoption, and the council has either switched his mind or decided it's not necessary and doesn't adopt it, and then it never is codified into the code.
Okay, and a follow-up to my own question. So if it gets to the point of adoption, that's where the different findings that the Vice Mayor was mentioning come into play, the general plan, et cetera, and also the concurrence with the report and findings of the school district?
Correct.
And are those prerequisites to adopting the ordinance?
No, you could still adopt the ordinance if, in fact, I disagree with the BIA and find that this is a mechanism that can still be used and is used. You could still adopt that ordinance and then not pass the resolution for this school district and tell them that you don't concur. But again, that would allow a mechanism for them to come back at a later day with maybe different findings that were adequate that you can concur with.
Okay. Councilwoman Sayak.
The questions that you had asked actually were similar to mine, and so I'm actually prepared to make a motion. If there
Go
are no-
ahead.
Okay. Given the discussion that we've had today and understanding the different positions that we've already heard, I feel comfortable that moving for introduction and first reading of an ordinance can be made. Concurrence of those findings will be coming back at September 15th. Further legal analysis will be coming back 15th. I feel that at this point, the school district has done their due diligence, and in good faith effort, I think that I am prepared to move for introduction and first reading of an ordinance. By title only, I believe, adding Los Gatos Town Code Section 25.60.
Okay, so thank you. We have a motion as stated. Councilman Rennie?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'll go ahead and second the motion. I also agree with everything that Councilwoman, Sayak said. In the 9 months that I've been on the council, I've attended 2 summits with the school district, and it's pretty clear to me that the SB 50 fees at the $2.50 level are not adequate to deal with the growth of schools. I don't know if the $9 is a correct number or not. I've had other discussions with other council members of the Cities Association and other venues, and it's clear that SB 50 is a problem for growth in our city. So I don't know what the right answer is going to be, but this seems like an appropriate step in the right direction as we figure out the legal and the right amount that it should be.
Thank you. We have a motion on the floor and a second. Any other comments or questions regarding the motion? I'm going to call the question. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? It passes unanimously. So we will hear this again on, and Councilwoman Sayak, did you want to make a motion with respect to the time limit?
Yes, given the information presented, I'd also like move to that we add on 30 additional days for review, and that, I believe that's all. Okay, that's my motion. As allowed by the government code.
Okay, is there a motion to extend time? Is there a second?
Second.
Councilman Rennie seconds. Comments or questions on the motion? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, so those of you interested, we will see you back on September 15th.
Mayor, I need to read the title.
And we'll read it.
An ordinance of the Town Council of the Town of Los Gatos adding Section 25.60 to the Los Gatos Town Code relating to the adoption of mitigation fees pursuant to Government Code Section 65970 to relieve conditions of overcrowding in the Los Gatos Union School District.
Thank you. As promised, we're going to do verbal communications. I inadvertently skipped over it because I didn't have any cards. Verbal communications is a part of our agenda where anyone in the audience can come and speak with us about some item that is not on tonight's agenda. So if there's something that you want to address the council about that you don't see listed in the agenda tonight, now's your time to do that, and you'd have 3 minutes to do it. Okay, seeing no one, I'm going to move on to item number 6, which is a discussion of an agreement with KCAT for cablecasting services. Ms. Gilmore.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Christina Gilmore, Assistant to the Town Manager. The item you have before you this evening is to approve an agreement with KCAT for cablecasting services. As mentioned in the staff report, KCAT has been cablecasting Town Council and Planning Commission meetings since January of 2003. A 5-year agreement for cablecasting services was approved by the council in 2010, and that agreement expired on June 30th of this year. The agreement you have before you this evening is for a 5-year agreement for $35,000 annually to cablecast 28 council meetings, 28 planning commission meetings, and 4 special committee meetings, and includes a 3% annual CPI. For your reference, in the addendum that was distributed on August 31st, Attachment 4 provides a summary of the cablecasting cost comparisons amongst the 5 cities that were cited on page 2 of the staff report. As you can see, the cost for cablecasting varies across jurisdictions. However, the $35,000 proposed agreement for cablecasting services for Los Gatos is reflective of the 60 total meetings that are included in the agreement and is above the average total number of cablecast meetings for the jurisdictions that we reviewed. This concludes the presentation, and staff is available for questions.
Questions for Ms. Gilmore? Councilman Leonardis.
Thank you, Mayor Jensen. Ms. Gilmore, in our staff report, it mentions a potential of an additional $5,000 annually for the broadcasting of the annual holiday parade. That amount is currently not included in the $35,000, is that correct?
That is correct.
One more follow-up question. When it comes to the PEG funding, and it looks like it's $98,200 per year, so essentially that funding is added to the $35,000, so the total of the contract is $133,200 a year, essentially?
The $35,000 is for just purely cable casting. The PEG funds that the town allocates to KCAT is separate from the cable casting services. So the PEG is for education and community access funds. So those are for separate line items within the KCAT budget. So it's to provide, to purchase equipment and to provide public access for television channels.
So just to clarify on the PEG funding, that is a component of people's bills. So there's like a fee on their bill, cable bill, and then it raises this funds, and then those funds are then provided to KCAT according to our agreement. But suppose the town wanted to, as we have in the past, retain some of those funds for our own use. Is that still an option, or have we been giving away all those funds for, say, recent memory? How many years has that been going on?
Certainly. So yes, the town does have an option of renegotiating the PEG fund payments with KCAT if the town decides that there needs to be substantial upgrades to the current cable casting or broadcasting systems or equipment that we have here at City Hall. So we could enter into a renegotiation with KCAT to negotiate withholding of PEG funds at any time throughout this agreement.
Thank you.
Other questions for Ms. Gilmore? Thank you. I do not have any cards from anyone in the audience who wants to talk about this. So unless someone runs up, I'm going to close the public hearing and look to the council for discussion and or a motion. Councilman Leonardis.
Thank you, Mayor Jensen. Being that I live on Terracita Way for quite some time, I was never able to tune into KCAT, so it was one of those things where I always felt I wish I could, but I can't. I'm just wondering what the amount of reach is in the current time. We signed our initial agreement back in 2003, and we assume there's a lot of people tuning into Channel 15, watching our meetings. But how do we measure that, and how do we know how many people are actually tuning in, or how many people are being served by what we're paying for, I should say?
Ms. Gilmore, can you answer that?
I cannot answer that, but we do have representatives from KCAT in the chamber, so if they can answer that question, the council could direct that question to them.
If you're here from KCAT, we'd love to have you come up and answer that question for us. If not, it's going to go unresponded to. Come on up to the podium, tell us who you are and whether you can answer the question or not.
I'm Ken Turan. I'm a board member at KCAT. A little difficult to really analyze that. We don't have the funds to really assess and measure how many people actually tune into our channels. But we do know that we serve a wide variety of constituents, from the schools to the community at large. We are also able to broadcast certain programs via YouTube, so that expands the reach to those that perhaps don't have Comcast or wish to access our programming via the internet.
First, I'm going to call on Councilman Leonardis. Does that answer your question?
A little bit, but Vice Mayor Hatter.
Okay, Vice Mayor.
Thank you. Even though you don't have the mechanism to determine the number of people watching us, are you able to give us a geographic breakdown, like, 30% of Los Gatos geographically doesn't get the reception? Do you have that kind of metric?
I think that information would probably be accessible. I just don't have the information right now. We could certainly try to find that information. I'm sure between the town and Comcast, I suppose we can maybe get you that information.
Thank you.
Anything else? Thank you very much.
Sure.
Would you please fill out one of these cards for us, just so that we have your name in the record? Thank you. Okay, I'm going to call on Councilman Leonardis.
Thank you, Mayor Jensen. Perhaps another question for Ms. Gilmore. So, does the town have any equipment needs according to your assessment? For instance, are we still filming in analog or whatever it is and not digital?
Yeah, so currently we are filming in standard definition. The town can certainly do an assessment to see how much it would upgrade to high definition, but we do feel that that is several years away. Myself and our IT manager have met with the KCAT engineer department to assess equipment replacement. We've replaced one piece of equipment so far this year, and we just met last week to discuss the replacement of another piece of equipment. We do currently have funds within our equipment replacement funds to cover those costs, but however, if we decide that other pieces of equipment that need to be replaced that are cost far more than what we currently have in our replacement fund, we would have to assess that and make a recommendation to the council.
And then one more follow-up. Is there any other facilities throughout our town, be it the police or our public works or anywhere else, where these PEG funds would be usable for our own equipment upgrades as opposed to just surrendering them all to KCAT?
Currently, it's only available here in our Civic Center. We have a control booth off the lobby here of the council chambers, and so that is where any equipment would be placed.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Ms. Gilmore? Thank you. Discussion and/or a motion? Okay. And I'll jump up at once. Okay. Councilwoman Sayag.
Okay. I'll go ahead and make a motion. I move to approve the agreement with KCAT for cable casting services. With public television, I've always thought that it's not necessarily the number that are actually viewing it, but the availability, should people want to tune in. And I do think the Planning Commission meetings as well as Town Council meetings are just one of the avenues that we have to reach out to our constituents. And so for that reason, I think the negotiated amount is, in my mind, well-serving of those funds.
So is that a motion to approve?
Yes, to approve.
And I did not hear in your motion any mention of the proposed $5,000. Did you want to put that in your motion or not? I'm not suggesting that you have to. You just didn't mention it.
I'm ambivalent about, so if whoever seconds it, if I do have a second, if you'd like to tag on, that would be.
So we'll leave that, we'll leave your motion without a mention of that right now and see if there's a second. Councilwoman Rennie?
I will go ahead and second the motion, and I'll make the comment that it's not just the cable, whether you have Comcast or not, it's available. I do not have Comcast at my house, and I can guarantee you that my wife is watching right now, streaming on her iPad. Hi, Isabella. So I really think it is available to most of the town, anybody at least that has TV or internet. So I will go ahead and second the motion as is.
Okay. Any other comment or question on the motion? I'll just say that I think it's only our spouses that are watching sometimes. But all right, we have a motion on the floor in a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. It passes unanimously. Item number 7 is a consideration of the adoption of a policy in the town of Los Gatos for the use of social media. Ms. Murphy.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm Heidi Murphy, Library Director, and I have presenting with me tonight Sarah Masunik, Community Services Officer with the Police Department. There's our presentation. So you have before you tonight a proposed social media policy for the town of Los Gatos. We're going to cover really quickly in this presentation how we're currently using social media, how our neighbors are using social media, and some policy highlights as we think about moving forward. So we are currently on Nextdoor, We're using Nextdoor to push out specific community information, special events, road closures, and we have about 27% of our households represented through Nextdoor. In the library, as council is all aware, we are using Instagram and Facebook, and this is as a way of extending our services beyond the library walls. Social media continues to climb in use, and according to the Pew Research studies, this is growing across age demographics and across socioeconomic demographics. All of our local neighboring agencies in Santa Clara County are on social media. They're using this as an engagement tool and as a way to push information out to their communities. Mountain View is really on the forefront of social media. They are using multiple platforms across multiple departments, both free platforms and subscription-based platforms. Parks and Public Works departments are using this to push out road closure information, how to get around traffic, if there is a major accident, if a pedestrian path is closed, how do people get from point A to point B, what upcoming events are happening, and how does the public engage with those. Other departments such as finance, HR, planning, town manager's office, and council are mainly using these to push out information. So if there's a new budget, finance will push out some great infographics. HR uses it as a recruitment tool. So we have a new finance manager position, for example, we would post that. Planning departments are using it to push out new codes or an upcoming code enforcement event. And then the manager's office and council really to push out council meetings, community events, and things like that.
Law enforcement is using social media to communicate public safety information, request assistance from the public in regards to investigations such as missing persons cases, make traffic notifications, assist with the recruitment of employees and volunteers, and also to inform and educate the public in regards to programs that might be in occurrence, such as safe routes to schools. Social media users are active in Los Gatos. Over 76,000 users have generated check-ins in this generic Los Gatos Facebook page, and there are over 70,000 hashtag Los Gatos Instagram posts. The ability to reach so many people so quickly has proven to be an effective tool for law enforcement. The Gilroy Police Department was recently quoted in a San Jose Mercury News article as saying that their social media followers positively identify criminal suspects 85% of the time when asked, and several of those identifications are occurring within 10 minutes of the original posting.
So some highlights of the policy as we think about moving forward is that we are using this policy to create social media as another communication tool to really engage with the community, to promote transparency, to enhance access, and really to assist in service delivery like we do in the library currently. The policy itself does provide a lot of different layers of oversight, policy disclaimers, public records access disclaimers, things like that for each of these social media sites. That concludes our presentation, and staff is available for questions.
Thank you both for your presentation. Let's see if there's questions for you from the council before we hear. I don't have any cards from the public, so council, this is your opportunity if you have any questions. Vice Mayor Spector.
Thank you. For this question, I'm going to separate out two different things. First of all, the announcements like you were talking about, announcements like we have on our town website where you just say something is happening on September 15th. So separate from that a more fluid kind of communication. And so that's where my question would be. Putting aside announcements, do you see the social media policy being used to make, I will call, a more fluid announcement, and I'll even define that better for you. Right now, the town is, the communications from the town are either made through the mayor or the town manager. And that is done so that what goes out is a reflection of what the council has decided. So how will the social media policy on its many platforms address that issue?
So you're referring mainly to press releases?
No, the issue of the communications being a reflection of decisions or policies being determined by the council, as opposed to individuals just speaking from their own mindset.
I see what you're saying. So we do have attached to your packets tonight the social media standards and best practices, and they provide several layers of oversight. So this would be just an internal working document that staff would use to set up accounts, to monitor accounts, and to know what to post. And so there would be a departmental level of oversight, so any information that was going out from the department, social media would be an additional tool. So that information would go through the manager's office if it were a press release, and then that press release could be issued on social media as well. Or if it were an event, that event would be pushed out with the department head knowing, and a message going up to council as well through manager's memos. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Councilman Rennie, did you have your hand up?
Yes, thank you, Mayor Jensen. So one of my concerns when I started reading this was whether you had policies for places where the public can post, how you protect our First Amendment rights and balance that with what's inappropriate there. And I see the section on the Facebook, you know, in what page is that on? It says page 3 in this, but it's 3 of something anyway. So there's a whole section in here on Facebook that talks about reserve the right to remove comments that, you know, language is profane, discriminatory, or sexual in nature, or threatens, and so forth. So this looks like a good good section for Facebook, but I don't see it with any place else. And are you going to apply this same one to Instagram or any other tool we may use? And then let me put a second part to my question is, another thing that concerns me is if people are able to anonymously post things that can be abusive even while falling within your rules. So are people going to be able to post things anonymously? I'm kind of against that.
So let me answer the first question. If you look at the social media policy itself, page 4, that comment policy is part of this social media policy. And so any social media account that the town were to open up would have this comment policy posted if comments were allowed on that site. Not all sites allow for comments. So like Twitter really is just kind of a retweeting, and so we wouldn't put a comment disclaimer on Twitter. But any account that we opened up where someone could message back to us or comment for the public to see, it would have this comment policy up there so that we could take down things that were either not relevant to the topic posting or were inflammatory. As far as anonymous posting, Laurel, do you have any ideas on that? Would we be restricting anonymous postings if possible, or?
I think we would need to look at whether or not that's even possible, because sometimes people use pseudonyms or other names, so you really wouldn't be able to identify who the speaker is. Anyway, I think we just really would focus on the content of what is said and make sure that the content is appropriate under the policy.
Thank you.
Captain D'Antonio, you have a microphone. Did you want to say something?
Not specifically. I was just prepared if there was some follow-up questions. One of the things that the chief, kind of the vision of this is, if this does get approved and once this, we were to launch social media, we would do it incrementally. So on some of the sites, we're able to turn off the interaction so you wouldn't be able to post on the wall. And so that may be an option that we would take on, at least initially, until we really saw how the social media interaction worked on a day-by-day specific basis.
Thank you. Other questions from the council? All right, I'll look to council then for discussion and or a motion. Okay, I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to make a motion to adopt the social media policy that is proposed and authorize the use of social media for town business consistent with this policy. The reason I would like to do that, make the motion for lots of reasons, but primarily for those of us that have been on the council and those of us who've been on planning commission, if we try to count the number of times somebody has come into this chamber and said, I had no idea that you were doing this, we would spend a lot of time counting, or why didn't I get the postcard, or why didn't I get whatever it might have been. And there's a real struggle to try to figure out going forward how to get that information out to the public, because people don't just read newspapers anymore, they don't get magazines, they don't do whatever, and our content that we received is so individualized that we can pick and choose our news, we can pick and choose our feeds, we can pick and choose who we hear from. And so the more platforms that the town can have to reach its citizens, the better. So that's why I think we ought to move forward with this and get started. So that's my motion. Is there a second? Councilwoman Sayoc.
I'll second the motion. This was certainly a priority that we identified at our last meeting in increasing avenues of communication, and I do think social media is one of them. I would like, however, from staff, as this launches, just updates on how it's going. The area that concerns me the most are the comment sections, because we've seen cyberbullying in many facets, and I just want to make sure that in no way we promote any of that. And so when you do open those comments pages, if you just let us know ahead of time and how you're monitoring and how it's going. It's a new endeavor for us, so I just want to make sure it goes smoothly.
Thank you. We would be happy to do periodic monitoring for the council, and if there is ever a time where we have to take down a comment, we would let you know immediately.
Thank you. Other comments or questions on the motion? Okay, seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes unanimously. Which brings us to the report on cut-through traffic. Speaking of cyberbullying, Mr. Morley.
Good evening.
Yes, we have.
One of the things that we've learned. Is that there's a relationship between physics and cut-through traffic. We've taken this in several approaches. One is a short term to mitigate the problem as we're seeing it. So sort of what can we do today to make some of the pain go away from cut-through traffic? That's what we've been doing through the course of the summer, and we've been reporting to you. All of this has guided us towards our midterm goal, which is some relief at Labor Day, which we expect, especially given the forecast of warm weather, heavier traffic. And in the long term, reducing the impact through larger multi-year efforts to affect cut-through traffic. We've talked a lot about what's working, and there's some things that have not worked. We've done intersection modifications. We've talked about Winchester at Albright as traffic signal location where we've done traffic signal modifications to change the timing. The goal there was to slow the traffic coming into town and provide some relief there. We've also done recently some changes to the intersection of Main at Santa Cruz. We found that to be very effective, where we've changed that intersection from a three-way intersection to a four-way intersection, and we're going to continue those efforts. We've also done some road closures. They started as a no right turn, except for local traffic on Tate and Massal. We found that those weren't so successful, so we actually changed it to a full closure of that right turn and coned it off. That seems to have been more successful, so we learned there and made some adjustments. In terms of messaging, we've used the portable message signs as we've talked about, and we relocated those several times to adjust and optimize. We've had some good and some bad with that. Some of them have been in the way, so to speak, in the way of right turns in front of residential houses, in one case on the Los Gatos Boulevard, where they're not well welcomed, and that points to the fact that these are short-term interim solutions that we need to come up with long-term solutions for. In addition to the infrastructure work that Parks and Public Works has done, the police department has done quite a bit of work, and I'll turn the mic over for a little bit to Captain D'Antonio on that.
Mayor, Council, As you know, over the last several weeks, we've really been in an evaluation phase, really looking at what would work, what wouldn't work, and partnering with Public Works. So we did over the last several weekends, we actually had officers come out that were dedicated to traffic control and to the cut-through traffic. We also had some command staff on scene to really evaluate what was going to work and what wasn't going to work. So we started our efforts really with enforcement, and we looked at intersections that were being blocked due to gridlock. And using the penal code, we were able to write several citations. And that did help because what it did was have the focus of people to anticipate if the light was going to turn red, that they weren't able to make it through the intersection. And what we wanted to do is to avoid that gridlock so no one could get through. We also looked at doing several other things. One of them was we actually took over the intersection of Main Street and South Santa Cruz. And when I say take over, we used traffic control officers to regulate the flow of traffic. We did this for a couple of reasons. We wanted to see if we moved traffic quickly or for long periods of time on North Santa Cruz, that it would actually help us to relieve some of the east-west traffic on Main Street. In addition to that, we had Public Works stand by and watch while we were really experimenting with that intersection to see if some of the efforts could be made to actually change the way that intersection worked in regards to signal timing and truly changing the way that intersection was being activated. And I think that's one of the implementations that came through. We also remain flexible. What we wanted to do was see what other areas we could look at and try to help. We focused on the corner of Main Street and College. As you know, we were having several citizens' complaints and concerns about being unable to get through College onto Main Street because of the gridlock there. And we also wrote several gridlock citations for blocking that intersection. The last thing we did is when we actually did close the streets off Highway 9 on Tate and Massal, we had officers there just monitoring to see if it really did help us out with the cut-through traffic in the residential areas and to see if motorists were going to obey those traffic signs. So we were getting different reports. When officers were there, there was a better likelihood of them obeying those signs. Unfortunately, we did see motorists using private driveways to cut through and try to avoid the cone patterns and the barricades. What we're going to do for coming up on Labor Day weekend, we're going to, again, dedicate officers to traffic control. They'll be in on overtime and have the ability to just focus on the cut-through traffic issues. We're going to bring 2 officers in on overtime on Saturday and 2 officers in on overtime on Sunday. We also have a Beat 3 officer who's dedicated to the down area, and in his discretionary time will also be working the cut-through traffic. And we're really going to do the same things that we've done the last 3 weeks that we saw that were effective. We will continue to enforce gridlock when intersections are being blocked and does not allow the ability for the traffic to flow. We're really going to look at the intersections that have given us the greatest problem. That would be Main Street and College, South Santa Cruz and Main Street. And depending on how much traffic we get this weekend, there is the potential for us to actually take over an intersection again with officers to direct traffic if we have a place to move the traffic. We really want to remain flexible to be able to respond to calls for service. When I say calls for service, the beat officers will be there for public safety and the normal calls of service, but the officers that are going to be on duty on overtime will be able to respond to specific problem areas that are generated through our dispatch.
In terms of the Labor Day weekend, from Parks and Public Works perspective, we're going to continue working in the areas that we've seen success. I should note that we've had our traffic engineering consultant out on several weekends, and he's provided us several recommendations that have been very effective as we've been adjusting over time. He'll be out again this weekend doing additional work and additional evaluation to see how these the changes have helped and to provide long-term solutions for us as well. So this coming weekend, we'll continue to have Tate and Massal closed. We'll continue with our portable message signs on local streets. We've also been working with Caltrans, and Caltrans is committed to posting signs on their permanent changeable message boards, so the big signs that you see over the freeway. So we'll have a message on southbound Highway 85, which is right before you get to the Winchester off-ramp. We'll have one on the message board coming northbound 85, which is even before you get to town, but appropriate, I think, for the messaging. And one coming south from the Campbell area on Highway 17 that will message. All of those messages will direct traffic to stay on the freeway, use Highway 17 for access to Santa Cruz or to the beach. Caltrans is working on that language specifically. They're pretty protective of those signs and what language goes on them. We should have that language finalized in the next day or so. It was a big effort to get that commitment to them, and a lot of work went into convincing them that this was an important thing to do, but we're appreciative of their partnership. We've also received an encroachment permit from Caltrans to place 3 additional portable changeable message signs on the freeway. We'll place those closer to the off ramps, one close to Lark on 17, one close to one on Highway 85 as approaching 17, and one approaching 17 on southbound 85, so sort of both sides of 85 as you approach exits coming into town. The messaging on those signs, again, will encourage traffic to stay on 17, to use 17 for southbound traffic. In terms of mobile apps, I have had a couple conversations with Waze, trying to work towards a solution with them. They have said that they would be willing to deprioritize some specific streets, and I provided a list of streets that I would like them to deprioritize. I have not been able to follow up and receive confirmation that they'll have those in place for this weekend. I'm still hopeful, but it's been a little bit quiet, so we'll see how that turns out in the next day or two. I do feel that that's an important step that we need to finish, even in the long run. I think the more interaction we see with traffic over the weekends, the more convinced I am that the apps are playing a significant role in directing folks off of through corridors and onto residential streets. In terms of conclusions and next steps, in managing expectations, we're looking towards some long-term solutions. The long-term solutions are likely to cost money. We're having conversations with Caltrans and VTA now about what that might look like and how we might make asks for grants or for other opportunities. And there may not be 100% fix. We hope to be able to mitigate the effort and to put some actions in place that help to reduce traffic. But as I started with, everything we do seems to have a counteraction, and we're trying to balance those. The infrastructure modifications, as I've listed in the staff report, we'll likely start with a proposal on modifications to Santa Cruz and Maine. That seems to be a low-hanging fruit for us. But again, that doesn't change the amount of traffic coming through town. It just helps it to move through town quicker. Managing the signals throughout town is going to be another priority, and I think there may be a partnership opportunity there through Caltrans and VTA. And as I mentioned, partnership with Waze and Caltrans is going to continue to be important. I think they're both organizations that can help us to address the problem to some extent. And we're aware that we need to pay attention to unintended consequences. Some of this may require a traffic study so that we can explore the consequences a little bit more in depth before we move forward with them, especially if we're investing capital dollars into these. And with that concludes the staff report, and we're available for questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Morley and Captain D'Antonio. I'm going to ask council to defer their questions of you because I do have one card of a speaker from the public, and I'm going to take that and then close the public hearing and then have discussion and direct questions to you, Ms. Dorner.
Hello, I'm Angelia Dorner, and I am a proud resident of the Almond Grove. What a lot of people don't realize when they hear about the cut-through traffic through the Almond Grove is that it is not just a couple of streets, and it is not just Tate or Massal. There are thousands of homes west of Santa Cruz and north of Highway 9 that are impacted by all of these closures and other significant traffic issues. So we have always had beach traffic. For the last, it's gotten a lot worse in the last 3 to 4 years. I have always planned my trips on weekends to typically, if I remember in time, to hit Pollard all the way to Quito, to Highway 9 and back home. Now I can't even do that because I am sort of locked out of being able to get home. The real problem is that for these thousands of people who live in this area, there are only 2 ingress and egress areas on Highway 9 and 4 on Santa Cruz. There really are no other options except further up on Highway 9 to turn right on Ridgecrest when you're trying to come home, which I admit I did do a couple weekends ago when I had no choice to have to leave my home on a Saturday in my car. And it worked fine. And the only other cars that I saw were people also going home up in the Almond Grove and Ridgecrest area. The closing Tate and Massal, I fully understand why that was done, and I think it needed to be done to get a better handle on this, but I don't think the majority of residents understand that the primary impact is down here, Main and Santa Cruz, because all of those cars going through those 2 primary streets are heading straight for Main and straight to that intersection, which is where everything really bottles up coming in from all different directions. What I'd like to do is to focus on 2 primary intersections, and I'm going to go back a little bit here in history. I'd like to focus on Massal and Highway 9. In October of 2013, when we started talking about the Almond Grove project again, I discussed the following major issues with PPW. A lot of this was brought up at the community outreach meetings because it is almost impossible to get out of the Almond Grove area, all of those thousands of people, on Massal and Tate because of the constant inflow of traffic on Highway 9. And I'm not just talking beach traffic. I'm definitely not. I'm talking every day of the week and the majority of hours throughout the working day from probably about 10 until 6 o'clock at night. It is really impossible. And Tate, from Tate trying to get over into the turning lane to go up on Santa Cruz, it's really just crazy. I'm sure a lot of you have experienced that. But what I had suggested or tried to talk with them about, and was politely told to go home, was to basically put at a stoplight, just a regular old-fashioned kind of stoplight at Highway 9 in Massal.
Is that really your 3 minutes? We have your slides. It's the red light's going off.
Oh my gosh, okay.
See if anybody wants to ask you a question.
Please.
Thank you.
Oh, okay.
Okay, I don't have any other cards on this topic. So I'm going to close the public hearing up. Anybody else? Please give us your name.
Hi, my name is Ginger Rowe, and I own a business in downtown Los Gatos, Time Out Clothing at 108 North Santa Cruz Avenue. And I just want you to be, I agree with her. It has been going on for years and years, and I agree it is not just the weekends. It's every day of the week. But I also want you to be sensitive to the businesses and being respectful, because when you turn away people, you turn away our business. Oftentimes people get off because it is crowded to stop and have lunch, and they shop. And they have lunch or they have dinner and decide, oh, I'll just go over to Santa Cruz later. I hear that all the time. So I hope that in all the signs and every direction that you're sending people not to come to our town, that you don't chase away our customers. Please be sensitive to that when you do that. I live on a very big cut-through street on Inglewood, and people cut through there all the time. We're not blocking that off. You know, we all live on these streets. We all pay taxes for these streets. Just please be sensitive to the businesses downtown, that we don't chase away our business. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions for Ms. Rowe? Wait, you have a question, actually. Councilwoman Sayak.
Thank you, Ms. Rowe. Many people have asked me, and I've never been able to answer, do we know if revenues for businesses have gone down during these weekends of significant traffic. I've seen lots of speculation that, the parking lots are empty, so I'm sure everybody's suffering. But there's no way for us to quantify it, and I don't know if there's been any data through the chamber, through your business that you're comfortable sharing, just so that we have a handle of how is it affecting our downtown businesses.
Well, I don't know about through the chamber how they could have that information, but I know that, when there's gridlock, our business does slow down, but at some point it just stops and people get out of their cars instead of sitting in that traffic to go to Santa Cruz, and then our business will pick up on those days in the afternoon. But I think everybody knows you either go to Santa Cruz early in the morning or you plan on going over there late. Otherwise, you're going to sit in traffic to get over to Santa Cruz. But it doesn't really affect us as a stop in our business necessarily. And retail is very unusual because it comes in waves. Sometimes it'll be quiet and then the bus drops off and everybody comes in. So it's hard to predict, but I haven't seen a huge drop off because there's been gridlock.
Thanks.
Thank you. Anybody else? Okay, I'm going to close the public hearing. Are there questions for Mr. Morley and/or Captain D'Antonio? No, thank you very much. Well, actually, I have a question, Mr. Morley, if you might. Your report is suggesting that the council ask for two things or add two things to our VTA 2040 project list. And I just want to understand from you precisely what it is that you want the council to consider.
So we've asked for two items to be added to the list, and we've actually, because our deadline was yesterday, we added them with the knowledge that we're able to remove them, and that was through consultation with VTA. So better to be safe than sorry. Two items. One is traffic signal upgrades through the town that would allow us to have traffic signals that are a step above, more modern, more smart traffic signals, and allow us to do better control of signals. So the work that we're doing at Winchester or at Main and Santa Cruz, if we're able to be successful there, would be through a new, more integrated system. And the second would be a corridor study for the Greater Highway 17 and 85 area, completely different than any other discussions we're having, simply to deal with traffic that as it progresses through that area and over the hill to Santa Cruz, and what might be a solution in terms of solving that problem. So asking for a study in that direction, and ultimately recommendations out of that study would be something that would be considered completely separately.
Okay, so thank you. As I understand it, you've asked for them, and what we'd be doing is affirming that you've already asked for it by our action tonight?
One of the requirements is that those items are heard at a public hearing, so we wanted to make sure that you heard it and that it was heard in public. And certainly, if the council was uncomfortable with either of them, the delete button is still active and we can remove them.
Okay, thank you. Councilman Rennie.
Thank you, Mayor Jensen. This may be more as a statement than you can respond if you like. So when I've been thinking through the problem, and I really appreciate all the PPW's and the police department's efforts to, extra efforts on the weekends and willingness to experiment and try new things. I did want to comment that I'm a little concerned we're going in the wrong direction. I realize I'm not a traffic engineer, but I am an engineer, so I sometimes think like an engineer. And my concern, I wanted to make a comment on Main and Santa Cruz. The idea is to make traffic flow through there better, which sounds good, but it actually may be counter to what we want to approve, because traffic is like electrons in water. It's going to flow to the lowest resistance. So I think you can have short-term effects to clear things out, but especially with Waze and these other apps, you're just going to have more traffic come into town, and maybe that will help time out clothing if more people pass by. But I'm concerned that we really won't solve anything. We'll just encourage more people to travel through Los Gatos, and we'll end up with the next backlog, which is probably the entrance to the highway after you fill up 2 blocks of streets getting through there. So I'm hoping that we're going to look at more long-term solutions. I think you had on your list Caltrans agreeing to do some kind of study. I know they've been resistant to take the big steps that we'd like to that will actually make a difference. So maybe having them do a study and have them come up with what they think the solution a real solution could be, would be appropriate. So I like that idea. So those are my long-winded comments.
You can respond or not as you choose.
Thank you. I share your concerns at Santa Cruz and Maine. One of the actions that we did with the police department was open up that flow of traffic to see if we could create a backlog from the South Santa Cruz ramp onto 17, and we did not achieve a backlog. So it was a little bit, that was a positive from my perspective, but your point's well taken that when you create an opening and create increase the capacity, that soon that capacity is filled with others. And that's part of the point of the presentation, was sort of that every action we take may have a counteraction, and we want to be careful of unanticipated consequences.
Vice Mayor, did you have your hand up?
Yes, I did. Thank you. It's more of a comment than a question for Mr. Morley.
So, Mr. Morley, I think you can have a seat unless Councilman Leonardis has a question of you. You have a question? I'm going to ask Vice Mayor to hold her comment and get your question answered.
Thank you, Mayor Jensen. Mr. Morley, in your report, you recommend that we add traffic signal upgrades. And I know that some of the signals, this is just for the people at home also to understand, are owned by Caltrans, and some of them are owned by us, and it's hard to get on the same page as far as synchronizing some of those signals. But this is something that I'm very interested in hearing more about. What approach can we use to say, make it so the lights on Los Gatos Boulevard on the weekend, you don't get stuck at every single one. Highway 9, Nino, Kennedy, Shannon, Blossom Hill, because as people are taking these alternate routes, getting off the freeway and coming through our town, then they're getting stopped at every single light, and henceforth all of our residents are getting stuck behind them, and it becomes very frustrating.
So I think two questions there. One on obtaining control of lights from Caltrans. There's some of those that they'll be more willing to relinquish to town control, and others that they won't. Certainly part of the conversation that we'd like to continue with Caltrans now that we've got them at the table. In terms of Los Gatos Boulevard, I think that providing a smarter corridor there with an upgrade to traffic signals would be the ultimate goal, and we'd hope to get there.
So one follow-up, is that what you're, when you say upgrades, is that what they call the smart interlinked signal technology, or is it just putting a different timer on each individual light and trying to synchronize them?
There's levels of smart, I guess, for traffic signals. We have an interconnected system now along Los Gatos Boulevard, so those signals can work in concert with one another. It becomes a function of where you're going to affect the traffic moving through that intersection, through those intersections. So at some point you're likely to hit a red light or create an undue burden on the cross traffic. So it's all sort of a timing and a traffic engineering exercise. The new, even smarter technologies account for that, and they're able to identify the traffic loads on a real-time basis. And those are the kinds of things that I think would be great for us to have to be able to help move traffic through the town.
So one last comment is, for me, the smarter the better.
All right, does anyone else have any questions for Mr. Morley or Captain D'Antonio? Thank you very much. Vice Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Well, first of all, I'm sure I'm not the only one up here who wants to thank Parks and Public Works and the Police Department for their efforts over the past, since the 4th of July, actually since the 3rd of July. So thank you very much. When there's things that are complicated, I always say, well, it's either trending up or trending down. This situation is complicated and we're trending up. Yes, we don't have all the answers yet. I especially want to tell our staff how I appreciate the fact that they have finally been able to communicate with Caltrans, because during my tenure on this council, that has never happened. And I also hope, social policy person over here, I also hope that we can communicate to our constituents, because I will tell you that over the past month, there have probably been 30,000 people who, if they see me on the street, will give me a recommendation on how we the council, can solve the traffic problems in town. And a lot of them are like, you should really reinstall the toll house and assess a toll, and that'll keep people from getting onto 17. And when you bring up things like, well, Caltrans has a lot to say about that, there's sort of like this, this dead silence. And so thank you all very much. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and recommend that the town council accept the staff report on cut-through traffic and confirm the modification of the list of VTA projects to add traffic signal upgrades and a corridor study for the greater Highway 17 and Highway 85 area.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Is there a second? Seconded by Councilwoman Sayoc. Any further comments or questions on the motion? Oh, Councilman Leonardis.
Thank you, Mayor Jensen. I'd just like to comment to the residents. First of all, again, thank you to the staff for this. And comment to the speaker who spoke about the businesses. There's a delicate balance between trying to satisfy the needs of the residents and all of us pulling out all of our hair, and then trying to balance the needs of the business community. And we try to find that balance so it works for everybody, and it's a work in progress. And I just want to thank you for bringing all your comments and your letters forward. And there's no magic 8-ball here, but we're trying. We're trying our best for everyone to resolve the needs of the residents and the businesses. So, thank you.
Councilman Leonardis. Other comments or questions on the motion? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None. It passes unanimously. Which brings us to item number 9, which is a staff report on our water conservation efforts. Mr. Morley.
So just an update as we head to the tail end of the summer on where we're at in terms of water conservation. And a highlight on some of the numbers, because I think the numbers are important. When we started this on May 5th of this year, the numbers weren't looking so hot. In terms of regional savings, which for the sake of this presentation is the San Jose Water Territory, we achieved a 35% savings in June, a 38% savings in July, and year-to-date a 26% savings. So the goal is 30%. Regionally, we're at 26% year-to-date, but as you can see, the last couple of months have been very good, so performance has been strong, and hopefully we'll get there by the end of the summer. More applicable to us are the Los Gatos zip codes, and I reported about this early on as well. We started out not so hot with the 2% savings through April. Those were the winter months, so hopefully there wasn't a lot of irrigation going on, and that was the reason behind that. But we turned it around certainly with a 38% savings from May through August 15th. So good change and good improvement, which brings us to a 20% year-to-date savings. Remind the council that our target was 25%, so we've achieved and surpassed that target at this point, and I would expect our savings as well to continue to grow. There's been quite a bit of outreach by San Jose Water and the Water District to constituents, as I'm sure you've heard. And so the message it seems to be getting through. We've also had some conversation about our municipal savings. So these are the accounts that are in the town of Los Gatos name, and I showed a little bit more detail here to show some trends over time. So the blue chart, the high one, is 2013, which is the established baseline for comparisons in relation to the drought. The 2014 line is in red, and so you saw last year even the town was doing a great job of beginning savings on our municipal accounts. And the green line is this year. We are at a 40% year-to-date savings on our municipal accounts, so way above the 25% mark, and doing, I think, hitting the mark high. And thanks to especially the park staff who have really watched our turf in our parks to make sure that they could adjust water up and down to keep it reasonably green, but yet to achieve these high levels of savings. And the fun part, we've partnered with the Water District, and I brought some props. So we have these available at 41 Miles Avenue for folks if they'd like to come and get them. So it's drought gear. We have lawn signs in 2 different kinds, so you can get these. We also have lots of good drought information for you. And some fun things. We'll have drought buckets coming soon, so if you want a shower bucket, we'll have those in the next week or so. We have shower heads, low flow shower heads. One of the items that are Really popular are the shower egg timers to get you in and out of the shower fairly quickly. So we have those available. And we have faucet aerators if you want to lower the flow on your faucet. All of these are available in partnership with the Santa Clara Valley Water District at 41 Miles Avenue. We're open from 7:30 to 1 daily. And you can check those out or get those and own them from us at any of those times. And with that, that concludes my report, and I'm available for questions.
Mr. Morley, thank you. Are those free?
They are free, thank you.
Okay. Questions? Councilman Leonardis.
Thank you, Mayor Jensen. Mr. Morley, I saw in our staff report that out of the top 100 water, I guess, residential users in the valley, 29 of those were in Los Gatos, which seems like a disproportionate amount of heavy water users for our size of our community. Is there any outreach being done to those individuals by our staff to encourage them about the importance of the drought?
It is a high number considering the number of customers that San Jose Water has. We did not ask for the individual customer information, nor do I expect that we want it. But San Jose Water has committed that they are working with those account holders individually to help them to reduce their water usage. There is definitely targeted outreach at those individual account holders.
Thank you.
Other questions of Mr. Morley? Thank you very much. I don't have any cards from members of the public that want to talk to us about this, so unless someone jumps up, I'm going to close the public hearing, and I just did. Look to the council. We are being asked to accept Mr. Morley's report. Do I have a motion? Councilman Leonardis.
Thank you, Mayor Jensen. I move to accept the report.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Seconded by Councilman Rennie. Any comments or questions from the council? All in favor?
Aye.
Passes unanimously. It's 8:45, and we have two substantive items left. I'm going to look to the council for, do we want to take a break now for about 10 minutes or plow forward? I'm getting a thumbs up, Councilman. Okay. All right, so we're going to take a 10-minute break, approximately. Now we'll reconvene at about 8:55. If we could get all the council people back, all the staff back, all of the members of the audience who want to participate back, we're going to restart. And if those of you in the hallway want to join us, come on in. If not, we're going to close the door. So we are going to now take up item number 9, which is a continued, essentially, discussion of our strategic goals. At our last meeting, we went through a number of goals. We did votes. We agreed unanimously on some. We have others that we need to prioritize. So, Ms. Pravetti, will you be doing the report on this?
Yes. Thank you. Thank you very much. As the mayor mentioned, the council did a lot of hard work on August 18th, going through all of the items in your staff report tonight. We've tried to respond to the questions that we've received from the council. One set of questions had to do with what is our sense of accomplishment of all of the goals that are still in progress. So we did provide you with an updated chart with a bar graph that shows the % complete for those that are still in progress. So that's additional information for your consideration. Attachment 2 lists all of the items by the number of votes. So we had 5 items that received 5 votes with additional data regarding the lead department, the % complete, and in some cases, additional resources needed. So we have these as handouts that we can go through during the course of your discussion. We've provided the level of detail on resources for those items that received 3, 4, or 5 votes. We did not do it for the items that received 2, 1, or no votes. We've also combined some of the items, and if there are corrections to the combinations, we're open to those corrections. On page 2 of the staff report, under the discussion section, we've identified a proposed process for your consideration, but of course it's up to the council however you would like to work through these. And in the bullet points, it identifies that, and these are just suggestions, that the council may want to add all 5 items that receive 5 votes to the strategic goals for the 2015-2017 timeframe. Also consider adding all of the items that receive 3 or 4 votes that are currently in progress, and particularly for those that involve our Parks and Public Works Department. And then consider adding items that receive 3 or 4 votes and do not involve that particular department. So we're looking at how we can spread the work around, how we can make sure that we're really addressing a variety of services that the town offers to its community. And then fourth, if the council does wish to add more items to the Parks and Public Works list, that we may need to look at some trade-offs and switch out something that's either in progress or one of the items with 5 votes. As with before, we've got staff from our town department, so if you need additional information or clarifications, we're all here to help you. And that concludes staff's report. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Pravetti. This is probably a procedural question perhaps for you and to Steve. It was my understanding from when we ended the meeting last that we had taken action with respect to the various goals, that we wanted to get that confirmed back to us in the votes. And I just want to see if it's actually reflected in the minutes or in our vote taking, because it was my understanding that the 5 that received unanimous votes were going to be a goal. Am I right about that? Are those still open to discussion, or 5 of us voted for them and that's it?
That would certainly be the cleanest way, but again, now that you have additional information, we didn't want to foreclose the option if you wanted to at least just say, yes, these are the 5 and they're moving forward, but if you wanted to revisit it, that's possible.
Okay, and council, I will advise you that I don't have any public speaker cards on this, so I'm going to look out there in the audience. No one's coming forward, so. Well, I don't have any of those cards, so if I get those cards, this is number 9, not number 10. Oh, I'm sorry, number 10. I do, sorry. Sorry. Getting ahead of myself. Ms. Quintana, let me, before I do that, because I really didn't think I had anyone, I was using the wrong number. Look to council to see if they have procedural questions before we take our comments from the public. Okay, sorry. Oh, Vice Mayor.
Yes, I do have a procedural question, because it was my understanding also that if it had 5 votes, if an item had 5 votes, it was definitely a priority. The question is that in the 5-vote list, there are now staff inserted discussions, for example, hiring consultants, which would not necessarily be something that I would have voted for or would vote for. And so how does the mayor or the staff suggest we deal with those issues?
So in some cases, the consultant money is really for phasing. So if you wanted to bring forward some of these items in the more immediate term, we would need resources to do that. For example, under transportation around schools, there are several items that are underway. We already have the dollars in our budget to start with the school study. We're expecting kickoff in October of this calendar year. And then we're looking at phasing the idea of the transportation management later on, and then other work to happen in sequence. So there is some budgetary effort that might be needed, but it's really intended to just we can't do it all right away, so we're trying to phase the work over time. I think the transportation demand management, we can certainly include it, and then I think it really depends on what the outcome of the first study is, and then we would work from there. So not all of these would be happening at the same time, but rather let's learn from the first school study, determine what the next steps would be, and identify that up front.
Okay. It may be helpful for us, Ms. Gilmore, with the assistance perhaps of Ms. Bravetti, if we could get up on the board those items that you're identifying are, quote, in progress, unquote. So draw a red star next to them or something, not the other chart, this thing here, so that we can see what is currently being done that is in progress.
Okay, so the second bullet, which is the funding for Almond Grove, we'll be
I
talking.
think yellows. Oh, no, it does work. Okay.
Okay, so that one is in progress. We'll be discussing that at our next council meeting. We have the dollars, thank you very much, to do the transportation study around schools, so I would put that as in progress since we're scheduled to start next month. So that's the first bullet under transportation around schools. The transportation demand management would happen later, so we aren't proposing that we would get that one started right away. We would, to work with the high school to reduce student use of cars, we can absorb that into our work plan, but we want to get the study done first, so we're looking at a kickoff of April 2016. And then our bike and pedestrian master plan, we've received partial funding for a grant, and then we are looking at some other funding options, and we may have some other outside partners who are willing to help. I also just want to turn to our Director of Parks and Public Works to see, just on that transportation and schools item, Christina, if you could put it back up, just help the council understand what dollars might be needed right away, or what is new from what we discussed in August.
The two areas that will need funds right away are one, the transportation study around schools, where we've already allocated funds for that item. So that one's sort of covered already. And then the second would be the bicycle and pedestrian master plan, where we have a grant for partial dollars. I'm working on a solution for the other dollars, either through traffic impact fees that could potentially go to that, or else a combination of traffic impact fees and some help from VTA through a grant.
Okay, let's just start with the first five and show us again what's in progress.
Excuse me, then there's a whole series around downtown parking. So in progress, the RFI is now out for the garage at Main and Linden, so that's in progress. Add 2 parking garages. Again, I think we would like to phase the work around downtown parking. Let's see what kind of response we get from the RFI, and then we would move forward on whatever a second garage would be. Reviewing options to enhance parking downtown. So again, we're kind of already discussing parking, but if council wants us to do even more at this point in time, there would be a need for some augmentation of resources. And then revising the code with respect to parking. The valet parking piece is currently in progress. However, a full comprehensive review would require additional staff resources unless the council would be satisfied with a more sequential approach where we would just break up different parts. But to do a true comprehensive analysis of our parking code is a fairly major effort.
Okay, so Ms. Gilmore, can you just highlight the part that says allowing valet parking without a conditional use permit? Because that's the part that's in progress, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So are those the 5 that received unanimous votes?
Yes. So and again, there were some that were combined in terms of how they related to one another. So we grouped them. But if it's the will of the council, we could just include the highlighted items.
Okay, so before we move on to the ones that received 4 and 3 votes and go through that same process, let's stop unless there are additional questions and take our public comment. Okay, so Ms. Quintana.
Lee Quintana, 5 Palm Avenue. I just have 2 comments to make. The first one is to thank the council for doing the strategic planning the way they are this year during regular council meetings, because I think that gives the public a lot more chance to have input, and it's much more transparent, which is an overused word, but nonetheless. And secondly, I was just curious. I know I suggested the possibility of a grant writer, and in looking through this list, I don't see, and I know it got at least one vote. I think it got 3. And looking through this list, I don't see it on any part of either 5 to 0. Those are my comments. Thank you.
Thanks. Thomas Cook.
Good evening. I'm representing the Safe Routes School Coalition in town, and I just wanted to commend you all for your astute voting on these transportation around schools items. It's great to see this level of support, and it's helping galvanize a lot of the interest and ground roots support we've had around town, including from police and the school districts and students. So just a thumbs up. Conducting the transportation around study around schools is a great thing. Working with the high school to reduce students' use of cars. It's sort of a problem that's been with us probably as long as the beach traffic, and it's getting worse like the beach traffic. So to the extent that there's capacity, I urge anything that can be done in the short term to get that started. Timing is kind of good right now because they've just made an adjustment in the parking policy already. So it could be a catalyst for getting some change to happen if we can act quickly. And the bicycle and pedestrian master plan is a masterstroke. It will cement your legacy for years to come in getting an increase in bicycle and pedestrian use in this town. So all great things. And then, you know, these green bike lanes, it's way down there under 3 votes, but that got a lot of attention, and it made a really bold statement, and to the extent that it's been positively received and it's having an impact, I think we should continue with that as well. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Cook. You have some questions. Vice Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. You said that the high school did something. What is it that they did?
Good question. So the high school this year has restricted parking to only seniors, and the excuse they use to do that is the construction that's happening there. But it's an opportunity to potentially continue with either that change or some other change now that the status quo has been broken.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you. Other questions? Thank you very much, Mr. Cook.
Thank you.
Diana Abadi.
Good evening, council members. I just also wanted to commend the council, the staff, the police department for all of their work around transportation to schools. And I did want to let you know that I have stepped up on the Safe Routes to School, and something that we're doing at the elementary school district is memorializing the work that we've done. So I am now chair of another committee, and it's the Committee on Education for Safe Routes to School. And I'll be working with the police department, with Matt Morley, to try to memorialize all this work so we have it historically. On top of it, I guess I want to commend the council for also the strategic planning regarding the transportation study around schools, and we really want to partner with the town to help what we're doing. So I'm committed to that. The green bike lanes, our kids are committed, our principals are committed. We have a really tremendous group of volunteers, parents at all of our school sites. We have chairs, we have co-chairs, and the police department has come and spoken to our leadership there. So please keep us involved as you're going through this study. I know Matt and I are pretty connected there. But again, I am committed. I'm on another committee, and I welcome anyone to want to come speak and join us through that committee to see what we're doing. So we're doing some great work around the schools. Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Abadi. Questions? Oh, nope, thank you. Alex Holt.
Good evening, council members. I just wanted to introduce myself first. My name is Alex Holt. I'm the owner of Holt's Restaurant in Los Gatos, also the president of the Chamber of Commerce. here in Los Gatos. And I just wanted to say thank you very much for listening to the community. We feel like you guys are doing a tremendous job representing the businesses, but also taking care of the people that live here in Los Gatos. And we understand that it's very important that those work together. And I see the list that you guys have voted for, and it's my opinion that you guys have done a really good job. Traffic, parking, schools are all super big topics. Everyone is talking about it. I'm out in the community every day in the restaurant, meeting people, talking to people, and I keep hearing the same thing. We got to fix the traffic, especially the beach traffic. The parking is a huge problem. It's something we need to address to help businesses grow with rents going up and Santana Row and Santana Row-like buildings like North 40 is coming up. We need to make sure that it's still attractive for businesses in Los Gatos to work with the general plan and to keep people coming and getting that vibrant feel. One thing that I wanted to just put out there is that we might, focus too hard on the bigger picture of building big garages and to solve the big parking problem. We have tried out a little valet parking service, and it's a tremendous opportunity to solve the problem on a very quick fashion. We were able to safely park 32 cars in our tiny little 10 parking spot lot just by using a professional company, stack parking the cars. And I also been in touch with local businesses that are not open during the 6 p.m., kind of the Friday night, Saturday night, busy Los Gatos traffic. Everyone is circling around for 20 minutes to finding a parking spot. And there's a lot of local lots that are just sitting there empty. And there's opportunities there where if we change the rules, we could, on the business side, solve those problems ourselves, where the town don't have to come up with any money. We can find safe, good ways to find more parking spots to fit more cars and make sure that there's less traffic, in fact, because people are not circling around. So it's kind of a win-win. So I just wanted to bring that to everyone's attention and say hi to you guys today. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Holt. Let's see if there's questions. Councilwoman Sayak.
Mr. Holt, with your valet service, is it a test? Are you doing it Fridays, Saturdays, every time you're in business?
We did it for one Friday and Saturday only until I found out that there was a different process you had to go through, and it was roughly $2,000 to allow me to park cars in my own parking lot, which I think a lot of people don't agree with and think it's seems not the right way to go ahead, and it's too complicated. And things needs to be simplified, and things needs to be more cost effective in the future. And yeah, that's.
Okay, so a follow-up. An understanding we're working on the valet issue, but as a business owner, the fact that you've had valet, do you think it has improved business revenues?
I can just say that we increased business that Friday and Saturday by 40%.
Okay, thanks for that stat.
Vice Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. When you talk about your own parking lot and being able to put, 3 cars, one behind the other, are you talking about the lot off of University, if I'm looking at Holt, immediately to the left? Is that what your lot is?
Yeah, behind the restaurant.
All right, okay, thank you.
Any other questions for Mr. Holt? Thank you very much for coming. Sean Luca.
Evening, Council. Sean Luca, 33 East Main, representing Yogurt and Love. Talking about the strategic plan, the parklet idea specifically, and how it's kind of been rolled into the development of the Economic Vitality Strategic Plan, which I think is a great idea. Speaking to other points that other folks have spoken to tonight, the one thing, the theme that I get when we keep running into, and I say we, the town council, business owners, things like that, is we almost get paralyzed by our parking problem. And I don't want, I look at how the council went through these items, and again, I applaud you as well. going through that night, I sat here, I listened to you guys vote on it. It was a long night. That's really the only best way to go through it. You took those things, you voted on them. We appreciate that. We would just hope that those items that are in the 4 and the 3 don't get lost in the quagmire of the parking issue or the traffic issue, which, unfortunately affects all of us. Lady spoke earlier about diverting the traffic. I mean, we've had, my team members handing out sample cups, actually hopping on the bus and handing out like 12 samples on the bus because people were stuck in traffic for so long. And they absolutely loved it. And we don't mind the marketing, they're kind of captured audience. And so 10 years ago, there was traffic and parking issues. 10 years from now, it's going to be the same thing because it's Los Gatos. People love being here. I speak to the parklets specifically on looking at, using the valet as a parking, especially on that side of town as well. The outside seating and my discussions with Alex as well, and when he built his patio, which is awesome for him, he's got that, footprint can do that. And he's seen an increase in revenue to the point of increased rents, concerns about limiting seating versus square feet versus, how many parking spaces you have. It all becomes very cumbersome for the business owner, and really understanding how can I expand when I go back and look at encouraging the mom and pop businesses to innovate and build, business plans and models. It's very confusing and kind of daunting to look at and feel like, okay, I've got a good direction. I know where to go and how this is going to end. Lastly, I'll speak to the parklets again. I know I've spoken to Robert Schultz a couple of times, concerns that he has had, Matt Morley as well. Again, the proposal that we've put forward outside of, Robert's time and Matt's time, which is very precious and very little, there's no cost to the town from that aspect. So I'll end it
Thank
there.
you. And now I'm noticing what the problem is. The yellow light isn't turning on,
No.
so it looks like it's all fine.
There's
and
no
then all of a
30-second
sudden
warning.
you're done.
No.
Sorry.
It's okay.
We'll fix
It's
that.
the traffic management, the new
Exactly.
Matt Morley
yes.
changed that up.
We need
so.
to we need to ask VTA. Please make a note of it for smart timing devices. Questions for Mr. Luca? Thank you very
All
much.
right, thank
sir.
you.
Angelia Dorner. Well, no, now we're going to figure out something else. We're going to put a Jeopardy song on.
When you said that's your 3 minutes, I was like, God, if I spaced and missed it. It was 3 minutes.
It was. You just didn't get the warning.
Yeah, that's all. That's what I meant. I would have gone, skipped some stuff. Anyway, Angelia Dorner, proud resident of the Almond Grove. I just wanted to thank you so much for the Almond Grove. One of you had asked me, is the real reason you're doing this just to get your street done, kind of a thing? Because I've been here a lot over the last year. And it really is not. I hope that my message has been that all of the things that people come down to downtown for and that the residents support on behalf of our downtown is the reason why I've been so gung-ho on putting some investment dollars back into the area. All of the things on the bottom, the activities, using the slide from last year, I'm extremely thankful to you because of the tens of thousands of people who will now be coming into downtown for all of the various events that do happen in and around the Almond Grove. You have put a lot of extra things on the list to breathe life and vitality into our downtown, as I said a year ago, through the soles of our feet. And I'm excited to participate in anything that I can possibly do as a resident. I get all excited with my ideas like I did with the parking garage, and I've got a whole series of things that I'm ready to share with you all when you are ready to go forward on some of those goals. And the last thing I wanted to mention, sort of to echo Madam Vice Mayor's comment about consultants, I really think it's critical when we do use consultants that we have a clear understanding of whether we are using them for their specific expertise or if we are using them as glorified staff. I think that we do need to have a trade-off of, if we need more staff and their qualifications can be used continually over all of these new initiatives, that's much more powerful than just automatically going the consultant route. I also think we need to have a very clear problem definition and control points if we do go forward with consultants in any project. And so I just wanted to throw that out as well. And thank you again for all that you do.
Thank you, and your green light is still on. Doug McNeil.
Good evening. Doug McNeil, 17413 Pleasant View Avenue. I just wanted to comment that the work that's going on with Public Works in terms of grants, both through Caltrans and VTA, is a number one area that I think, and I wanted to double up on an earlier comment, an area that we could really focus on in terms of getting grant funding in place. 15 years ago, we actually authored some of the first grant funds that came through for Safe Routes to Schools with Marianne Parks and Deborah Fragoni. And we put in around 3 of the elementary schools some of the first Safe Routes to School. But kind of on a different path here, I was just wondering, as far as the application and working through with Caltrans and VTA and the work that Matt's doing, it's suggested earlier, is you think of all of the arterial traffic that comes through our town and cross traffic, and especially in the Almond Grove area, why that may not be a state route or it may not be a county route. I was just wondering if we double down on getting some additional grant writing done, could we perhaps address some of the street wear and street issues that we've seen on some of the main arterials and even some of the cross arterials through town as a potential funding source to help out the community, as well as helping, some of our cross-traffic areas. So just a creative idea. You think of what's going on here in the Valley, it's a great economic time. You think of the state of California having an $8 billion budget surplus, as well as the county having a $7 million surplus, which I'm sure is being spent fairly quickly. I think time is of the essence, and it would make a lot of sense, as an earlier speaker brought up, that we put some money in a place where we could extract maybe some additional funds to reach back. I mean, I think the state dipped into the town's reserves back in the last 10 years. I say we reach back and help ourselves to support the county of Santa Clara and what's going on here in the Valley and help our citizens in the community. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McNeil. Any questions? No. That's the last card I had. So unless Ms. Ristow wants to come up.
Hi, sorry about that. Maria Ristow, 85 Broadway. I'm on the Transportation and Parking Commission. I'm also on the new BPAC. I'm the chair, and I really appreciate that the town created this commission because this is another approach to helping solve traffic. And I would hope that the town could find a way to help us fund the master plan, because our BPAC's top priority is to have a master plan. We can't really do anything until we know what the state of our sidewalks, our bike paths are, where we're going to connect things, and how we're going to put all this together. And if we're going to solve traffic, one of the ways to do it is to get people out of those giant, humongous metal boxes when they don't need to be in them, and put them on a bicycle or let them walk in a way that feels safe, that's an effective way to move around. Somebody just sent me a quote recently, and it says, "You're not stuck in traffic, you are traffic. Get a bike and get free." So to that end, I was just in Amsterdam this summer, and one of the problems they have in Amsterdam is they don't have enough bike parking. And I would love at some point if Los Gatos had a problem where we needed to find a place for 9,000 bicycles, as opposed to another car parking garage. So I think as we approach everything, we need to look at every way people need to move around and ways people want to move around but don't feel safe yet. And until we have a master plan, the BPAC and the town can't move forward with figuring out what the next steps are for green bike lanes, for more bike lanes, for better crosswalks, and better sidewalks. So I would urge you to help fund that. Matt Morley did a great job getting a grant out, and we've got half the money we need. I was just at a bike summit this week, the Silicon Valley Bike Summit, and I talked to representatives from about 5 other towns, And all of them were so excited. They heard that we got this grant, and they said, well, your town will fund the rest of it, right? And I said, I don't know, I hope so. So I would ask that this be a priority.
Councilman Leonardis.
Thank you, Mayor Jensen. Ms. Risto, what is the rest of it? When you say the rest
About
of it?
$40,000.
40.
Well, Mr. Morley can answer, but for a decent master plan, after talking to people from the VTA, BPAC, the representatives there, we need about $80,000 to write a robust master plan, and the grant is for about $42,000, $43,000. 40, okay, so we have half of it. So we need about $40,000 to get this moving.
Thank you.
Ms. Risto, I have a question. And I think you know the answer, but if not, Mr. Morley, is the master plan, it's my understanding that the master plan is a prerequisite to additional grants, is that right?
That's correct.
Okay.
So we really can't do much else until we get that.
Okay. Other questions for Ms. Risto? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Strategic goals. Okay, I'm going to close the public portion of the hearing and look to the council. And what I'd ask the council to do first is, Ms. Gilmore, if you put the 5 unanimous votes back up, just ask us to start a discussion with those and see if anyone wants to change votes, has questions, etc. Councilman Rennie.
Thank you, Mayor Jensen. I'd like to just ask 2 generic questions related to the things that the speakers brought up. So on the master, if that's okay, on the master plan funding, I see it actually got no votes here, but since it's a commission priority, we're not putting we're not putting on our strategic goals everything that's on the commission's to-do list. So if we leave it in the no votes, won't it get done because it needs to be done with a commission? First question.
We would hope at some point to have some alignment between the council priorities and the commission priorities so that the commissions have some direction on where the council would like them working. And I think from staff's perspective, we understand we need to bring you back work plans from each of the commissions so that you can provide us some input, both staff and the commissions on that. In terms of where it will get done, yes, we'll continue to plug away at that one as a priority for one of the commissions. I think it becomes there's a couple things for consideration. One, with it falling to the council's priority list, it gets that extra look because it's a council priority as well as a commission priority. And then I had a second point. Oh, we'll I think the extra priority from being on both lists I think is important.
You got 2 questions.
Okay, second question was about the grant writer. I recall also being a grant writer item, but I don't, again, I've tried to look for it on this list. Did it get rolled into something else? And I seem to remember getting 2 votes or something like that also from that. So was the question from one speaker about the grant writer. Do we remember what happened to that?
Yeah, it wasn't one of the items that the council had indicated in the list that we went through when we voted. We have the vote tally with us tonight, so that one actually didn't get any votes at all because it wasn't a separate item. And unless my recollection is incorrect.
Is grant writer included in any of the items that have gotten votes?
Well, grants are a way of funding some of these items. We didn't identify it as a specific person. That's not really a strategic goal. That's more of a budget add that the council could ask at mid-year or at some other time that we need a dedicated staff resource for a grant writer. So, grants, again, are a funding source, but we didn't identify it as a specific add. And we're open if our tally is incorrect, but I think we just went through the council list that we had, and we have copies of that if we need to revisit that.
Thank you. So 2 questions. One is a follow-up to that. I think that there were several items that actually came up during our discussion last time that weren't on any pre-created list, and then actually I thought had gotten votes. But neither here nor there. the second real question or observation that I'm looking for confirmation is that the strategic goals process is a way of prioritizing work so that even if something doesn't get on our prioritized chart, that doesn't mean it's never ever going to be considered or never going to happen. It's just not on the top 5 or the top 10, correct?
Correct. And actually, the whole conversation is very useful for us as staff because many of these elements, especially around transportation and parking, they're all so interrelated. So just understanding where that first priority is a step forward. And then as we do studies or we do complete certain other pieces of work, we're able to then return to you with, here are some next steps or some logical next steps, and then you can direct and decide which track you would like to follow.
Okay, other procedural questions? Okay, so what I'm going to suggest, and people can certainly raise their hands and object or make a different suggestion, is that the council consider whether it wants to reaffirm those 5 unanimous goals that we identified from our last meeting. So if you would like to do that, I'm just going to ask you to raise your hand, just to affirm our prior votes, or if not, if you have a question or a comment, let me know that. So those that want to reaffirm those 5 unanimous votes, raise their hands. Okay, so it's 4-1. Vice Mayor, did you have a question or comment?
I had a question.
Okay.
With the answer to the question, I'd be able to raise my hand. If you're talking about the 5 being those that have been highlighted in yellow, or are you including, is staff including in the 5 all of the sub information, which includes the consultants, which I won't vote for as one of my 5. But if it excludes the consultants and only is the highlighted portion, I will vote for those.
Okay, so I'm going to take that as a comment. Then I'm going to ask a question because it's my understanding that when we vote for the strategic goals, that we are saying to the staff, here are priorities that we have that we would like you to take on. We are not voting for how that's going to happen, that you're going to come back to us and we could say yay or nay on how you propose to get that done. Am I right about that?
Absolutely. This is not a budget hearing. So we're trying to be responsive to the request for additional information.
Okay, so Vice Mayor, does that change your vote at all?
It does change my vote. Okay. So I will vote for the top 5 since it doesn't include the consultants.
Okay. Thank you. So we have 5 that want to reaffirm our 5 unanimous votes to include the subparts. And Council, going forward, just to reiterate Ms. Pravetti's answer, that what we're voting for is priorities of what we'd like to see addressed in the town, not how they're going to be implemented or budgeted. We're voting for those ideas as priorities that we want to make sure that we have those things addressed, and that any budgeting is going to come back to us if that's required, correct?
That is correct.
Okay.
I do want to just mention the smoking restrictions. I neglected to say that we were anticipating this to be included and absorbed in our current work plan. So while we haven't yet started that work with the Youth Commission, we're poised to essentially do it. So that one really should be highlighted as well, because that's very easy for us to get going on.
So I'm going to refer the council then to page 2 of our staff report and the bulleted items that are under discussion, which is the suggested way for us to keep going. So Ms. Gilmore, if you could take the top 5 unanimous things off. And the second bullet is indicating that it's asking us to discuss items that receive 3 or 4 votes that are in progress or involve public works, or considering 3 and 4 votes that don't involve Parks and Public Works. Does the council want to discuss everything and pick out those, what I'm going to say are now, as I understood it from our last meeting, Ms. Pravetti, 5 more things that we get to add as being our top 10, correct? So we have 5 more things on the table.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And there's a suggestion with the bullets, or the council could indicate to me that you want to have full opportunity to discuss everything that got 4 or 3 votes. Councilman Rennie.
Procedural suggestion question. Some of these are in progress. We may want to highlight the yellow ones so we understand sort of what's really already done.
That's an excellent suggestion.
Okay.
So would you let us know what's in progress?
Certainly. Well, drought, as you've just heard, is 75% complete. That's already in our work plan. We're making great progress there. Cut through traffic is, an ongoing issue, but I would say that's really in progress with the longer term steps that were identified, and that's really what those dollar figures refer to. Private shuttles is really a new item, so that is a new suggestion. The Explore funding mechanisms, this is in progress and actually will be discussed by the council at your next meeting. So I don't know if you need a strategic goal on that, but I would put it as in progress. Social media, you just adopted that policy, so that one is finished for now. I'm sure there'll be need to revisit it at some point. Digitized town records, this is one of those items that wasn't on a list, but through the discussion was added. And that's 20% complete, and we've got some data available. But this is one of those things where it's been started, but we don't have a concerted plan to just plow right through it and get it all done. So this I would consider to be more of a new item. Under the 3-vote category, Christina Gilmore has been working on the community grant process, so that is in progress. A new idea regarding an economic vitality strategic plan is on the list. And there's probably a low or no cost version of this. We did kind of the worst case scenario if we wanted to bring in consultants, but we could certainly do a high level plan with overall strategic, or I don't want to use that word too much, overall goals of what we're trying to accomplish with economic vitality, and then identify some work items around that. So I think there's a low cost version, but that is new. Other in-progress items would be the closed downtown streets. I put that as in progress just because the policy committee is talking about special events. And so as the committee is working through special events, this issue of how we deal with street closures will come up. And that concludes the in-progress items.
Thank you. So does council want to go through and just mention those 4 and 3 items that they would like to see included as a strategic goal? I guess I'm just going to invite comments, questions, or suggestions. Councilman Leonardis.
Thank you, Mayor Jensen. Being that a good majority of them are already work in progress, and being that we have unanimously adopted the 5, all the ones with 5 votes, I think that's quite a bit of work to be looking at in the next year. And we do this every year, so I would say let's focus our energy on the fewer things that we found the most important, and then the ones that are work in progress, and then the others will be what we called last year next up items perhaps in the future.
All right, I think that's a good suggestion. Ms. Gilbert, can you make it so we can see all the yellow ones? I was just wanting to see, short-term memory problem. The Economic Vitality Strategic Plan, is that one of the ones that we've identified as in progress?
No.
No? So if the council wanted to do that, it would have to be voted on and made into a goal?
Yes, and I just wanted to, because I know the council's cautious about the use of funds, but there is a more cost-effective approach to this.
Okay. Councilman Rennie.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I wanted to ask a question, I think, on the other page under the shuttles. So it says it's a cost of $50,000. This is not one that started, and we're looking like we might skip it. So I wanted to ask a little bit about what is this? Why is it $50,000? How much work is it? Should we really take this one off the table since it got 4 votes?
So the $50,000 is a round number placeholder for what I envision the staff work would be in terms of exploring this opportunity of potentially coming forward with an agreement or some sort of a program behind establishing private shuttles. It's essentially a half-time person to make that work.
Second part of the question, is this is a PPW work item that you really don't have bandwidth for at this time? Is that a correct statement?
That's correct.
Any other questions or comments? Councilman Leonardis, did you want to convert your statement into a motion that we could take action on?
I certainly will, if I can remember exactly what I said. I think I said that we will take all the items that we unanimously agreed on, that received 5 votes, and direct staff to start implementation on those. And then all the ones that were in the other categories that staff is already committing time and resources to, we also continue the work on those items. And then the other items that we found were to be important, those would be something we perhaps can consider in the future at our next strategic goals meeting.
Thank you. So I'll second your motion and ask whether or not you consider adding develop an economic vitality strategic plan to evaluate opportunities that allow the town to enhance vibrancy and attract residents, et cetera, because that's not been identified as a work in progress. And so would you accept that as part of your motion?
I will accept that.
Okay, then I'll second your motion. Questions, comments, discussion on the motion? Okay, oh, sorry, Councilman Rennie.
I guess it's not that important. I was just
that's okay.
I was actually going to make the same suggestion you did, because I asked this earlier of the town manager, now town manager, then assistant town manager, that there is bandwidth. That's Monica Wren that would be working on that. And so it's not really, I don't think it's going to be overloading the staff to add this item, and it's something I think she's interested in doing. So I would agree with the addition of that.
Okay, any other comments or questions, Vice Mayor?
Yes, with regard to that plan, it's not clear to me, but I'm assuming that the $20,000 to $50,000 cost, is that, if I could ask staff, is that staff time or is that a consultant time?
That's the approach, that's the cost if we were to take a consultant approach. And that's why I wanted to clarify for you that there is a low-cost option where in-house with existing staff, we could develop a plan, identify high-level objectives that we would like to seek, and then identify specific work items that might include some of the other ideas that we've been talking through with strategic goals, and then figure out how we were going to implement that. So council will have plenty of time to make sure we're heading in the right direction, and then maybe save our dollars for when we're really ready to implement and then make a difference in the community.
That's great, and I will be supporting the motion. I think it's really important when we're looking at these consultant or planning kind of items, because I've been working with experts for 38 years, and you have to have, your assumptions have to be factually accurate in order to then analyze what your objectives are. And so it's something that actually can't be done casually. The efficiency or effectiveness, I should say, of this study needs to be front-loaded with the work that you do before you start the study itself. So I think that's what I'm hearing, and I think that's great.
Any other comments or questions on the motion? Councilwoman Sayoc.
Just a quick question and then one small comment. So under economic vitality, we have 4 bullets. Are these similar to the transportation where you plan to do these sequentially? For example, the parklets. We've had significant discussion about parklets. Is that going to be 4th on the tickler list, or are these just the different items that have been grouped?
At this point, there are items that have been grouped, and I think as we start thinking about what is economic vitality in 2015 and what's our vision going forward for our community, I think having an idea that there is interest in parklets and that there is interest in potentially closing streets and trying some new ways to inject vitality into our town. So really it's a matter of not losing track of those ideas, but then figuring out when and how we might want to do it, and then if in fact it does seem like a great idea, then we would come forward to you with a specific plan about, okay, let's do parklets. What does that mean in terms of parking supply, et cetera?
Okay. I will be supporting the motion. What I'd like to do is, I like this overall plan that we have in moving forward, but I also want to echo what I can't remember which speaker said, but not to get stuck in the gigantic problem we're having, and if there are some easier fixes, that we just address them instead of grappling with the larger issues that seem to always make us a little bit more panicked. But with that, I'll be supporting the motion.
Any other discussion or comments on the motion? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Passes unanimously. Which brings us to the final item on our agenda tonight. This is a pretty comprehensive item that is trying to take up sort of some continuing issues that arise around our retail, our downtown. And this item is not necessarily for particularized action this evening so much as to give direction of staff as to where the council wants to go on these items. So with that, Ms. Wren. And I don't have any cards, and there's a whole lot of you sitting there, so if you want to speak on it, please fill out one of these yellow cards and give it to the clerk, and then I'll have it when it comes time for public comment. Ms. Wren.
Good evening, Monica Wren, Economic Vitality Manager. Before you this evening is a report that outlines the town's current provisions on formula retail, specialty retail, and outdoor seating. Los Gatos is known as a destination to shop, dine, and visit, and in particular, our downtown is known for its mix of businesses. The face of retail has changed quite a bit recently, and we're seeing more hybrid businesses come in. We're seeing the availability of people shopping online, so that the brick and mortar places are really challenged with finding innovative ways to bring people into their shops and to create some sort of experience that can't be purchased online or dropped off at your door. So given the complexity and the variety of these business models and the town's current regulations, it's often difficult to line up these new businesses with the regulations that we have. So understanding this is kind of understanding that there's kind of a large spectrum of choices that you can make, or the discussion could go tonight. Staff's tried to create a guide at the end of your report tonight that could walk us through the specialty retail, the formula retail, as well as the outdoor seating. Also recognizing that as you talk about these things, there are a variety of other regulations that come into play and that overlap. So we've tried to lay each of those out in the bullets. We're prepared here tonight with definitions, with some other information to put up on the overhead if you need it. And this report's been coordinated with community development. So Planning Manager Joel Paulson's also here to help with responses to questions.
So I think it'd be helpful for the council and for members of the public that are here watching or watching on TV if you put the bullet points up so that everybody can see them, so that as we go through each, and they may not get divided very neatly into formula retail, specialty retail, outdoor seating, but to the extent they do, if we could have those up there. And again, council, what we're looking for, I guess, is input on the suggestions that we've gotten from staff. How do you feel about creating new definitions, leaving old definitions in place, et cetera? Where do we want to go? So I'm looking for discussion from council or questions of Ms. Wren or Mr. Paulson regarding these items. So seeing no questions, anybody in the public want to talk to us about this? I saw a woman here, you have a card. I need to get your card before you can come up and talk, so I know who you are, and I can call you, all of you. Yes, over here to this lady who's raising her hand. Donna Novi. And so if I call your name, that means you come to the podium and you get 3 minutes to talk. You can tell us whatever it's important, you think it's important for us to hear. We may or may not want to ask you questions.
Okay. Hi, Madam Mayor. I'm Donna Novi. I own the Pastaria and Market in Los Gatos across the street. And I just wanted to show some support for the outdoor dining that is before the council. I was over at the restaurant, so I don't know what parts of the meeting that I missed tonight, so I don't know if I'm a little late on the game on that. Is that you're talking
You can
about right
say
now?
whatever you want on that.
Okay. Well, I'd just like to say that we've been there for almost 20 years, and we have neighbors right beside us that it's housing, like townhouses, and we've always been very respectful and responsible when there's ever been an issue, which has probably only been about twice in 20 years. We just try to get along with our neighbors, and we wouldn't be the type that if we did have outdoor dining, if there were problems and people let us know, we'd be really happy to take care of those and not let anything become a really big issue. And I think that given that chance, a lot of people in the community that have businesses would probably take on a similar responsible role. And, trying to get along with each other and work towards having something great, because I just really hate seeing everybody, a lot of my friends in my age group and younger, all going over to like Campbell and other places where they have outdoor dining, and they're sort of becoming really fun, hip places. And I don't want us to turn into like a place that closes early at night and there's no place to go, kind of like, I don't want to be disrespectful, but kind of like what's happened in Saratoga over the years. It's a quieter, sleepier area, and I like our vitality, and I'd like to keep it that way.
Thank you, Ms. Novi. I have some questions for you. When you saw the notice and you're going to stand up and talk and you say you support outdoor dining, tell me how you think that would look at your restaurant.
Well, we don't have a lot of space, so we'd probably have about 3 or 4 tables maybe out there, unless something happened with that, those structures that they were talking about with closing sides of the road. Like I think they do that in Willow Glen or
The
something.
parklets?
Yeah. I just like to do, people ask us all the time if they can sit outside in our little outdoor waiting area. And they like to be able to have nicer seating out there for them to be able to do that.
And I take it that if you did that, I mean, in looking at other cities in the area, you mentioned Campbell, for example, regulate their outdoor dining by making sure that there's enough room on the sidewalk for people to go by. They make the owner of the business be responsible for the furniture. They make sure that they're responsible for cleaning up the area and policing the area.
Mhm.
Are you fine with all of that type of regulation?
Absolutely. And increasingly, I mean, even though we live in the town called the Cats, it's really a dog town. I mean, there's just dogs all the time, and people are always coming up with their dogs, and they want to sit down and wait for their to-go orders to happen or to sit down and to eat out there. And I don't know if that would add any additional problems, but usually their dog just wants to sit down and have a bowl of water while they're eating their dinner, and it's not inside of the restaurant. So it just seems like it'd be another nice option. And there's a lot of people with strollers, and a lot of times they don't want to bring these giant strollers into the restaurant. They'd like to sit outside, have their little baby sleeping while they're enjoying a nice meal. I mean, it's not like there's a lot of rowdiness going on. It seems like people are really enjoying the weather. We live in a beautiful town. It's really nice for them to be able to sit outside and look at, the hills and everything that's around and watch the people stroll by.
Thank you. Other questions? Councilwoman Sayoc.
Actually, you had asked the question I had originally, but I also know you have a parking lot, correct?
Yes.
How many spaces do you have?
Well, technically, I'm not sure exactly how many are allotted to us, but we probably have I think there's about 15 spots back there. We share them with the other businesses, and we're the only ones in our place that are open at night. So in the daytime, because we're not open in the day, we let everybody use our spots during the day that have businesses, and they do the same thing for us at night. So at nighttime, even though they're not designated for us, we are allowed by all those businesses to use their spots. It's like just a little verbal agreement we have.
Okay, and so when you're thinking of your outdoor dining, you're thinking of actually on the sidewalk, though, not on the side where...
Yeah, because otherwise it would be in the parking lot. I don't think a lot of people would be very attracted to that.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Other questions? Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Susan Testa.
Hello, I'm Susan Testa. I own Romantiques in Los Gatos. I was born and raised here. I'm raising my kids here, and I've had a business for 21 years. If we're going to talk about outside seating, I think it's an awesome idea. I read about it in the Mercury News about what are they called, parklets? I think that's a great idea. Just thought I'd voice my opinion about that. Also, I was curious as to why we were considering 7 versus 10 for formula retail. To me, it doesn't really make a big difference, but I thought there must be a specific retailer interested in moving in the downtown area that has more than 7 locations.
I don't know why that's the suggested change, but
Yeah.
we'll have Ms. Wren come up later and
Cool.
we'll make a note and we'll ask her.
Okay. And I actually, in the past, have always been against big box retailers moving into town, but I think if it was done right with anchors, it could be a good thing for the town, because I don't know if you noticed lately that there's quite a few empty spaces in town, and even though the economy is getting better, I think that there are small businesses down here that are suffering, that there's not enough foot traffic, that we're not, well, by diverting traffic away from the downtown area, and I'm sorry for the residents that are having to endure the traffic from the summer and from the overdevelopment, but diverting away from downtown I don't think is a good idea for business. And that's it.
Okay, let's see if there's questions for you. Yes, Councilwoman Sayak.
I was actually going to ask whether she had an opinion between the proposed change to 10, but I think we probably would need to hear from Ms. Wren.
Yeah, I
The
just need more
difference between
information
the
about
two.
that. I was just curious, but I don't think it would make a big
Well,
difference, honestly.
Do you have an opinion? What I hear you telling us is that you think that some formula retail would be an anchor that would provide pedestrian traffic, but you wonder why the proposal from 7 to 10.
Exactly. I'm just curious about that, and I came here tonight to find out more about that. And I also think that if more formula retail comes into play, I think there needs to be ordinances, controlling that. And I know that you have that because I've been here for a lot of those meetings. But I don't think it's a bad idea, to revisit that.
Okay. Councilman Rennie.
So I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I think I'm hearing what you say. You still want some controls to not let too much formula retail, but you think we need to adjust the ratio that we kind of have now. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, I'm concerned that we turn into a town where there's too much formula retail and it kicks out all the little guys. And what happens is rent goes up, obviously, right? Look at Burlingame. Certain areas, it can be great. It can have a great mix, but I think you have to have control. And I know that there are people that own the buildings and you have only so much control because it's not like a federal realty, where you have control. But I would be open to maybe a few more big box retailers, as long as they don't destroy the existing retailers that are in town.
When you, if I may follow up, when you say big box, people often think Walmart. I don't think that's really what you mean.
No, I mean the ones that have 7 to 10 stores, limited.
Small versions of
Exactly,
them,
yeah.
but big retail.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I think
Thank you.
so. As long as they add something to the town, and who judges that, I don't know, but yeah. Anything else? Thank you.
Okay, Ms. Desta, I actually have before you run away.
Oh, sure.
You were indicating that you think that there should be some control on formula retail, but you still think that in certain circumstances, it makes sense. So what I want to understand is, we currently have an ordinance in place that really, pretty much, there is a presumption that you cannot have a formula retail store. And I'm wondering whether, and with lots of other things in the downtown area, and it only applies to the downtown area, it doesn't apply to the entire town. So my question to you is, with other things that go on in town or in the downtown, there a process for a conditional use permit. So if you're a restaurant, for example, you come in and you get conditions on your use and they examine what you want to do, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. What the town has in place now is an additional presumption on top of that says, and if you're formula retail, basically, unless, all kinds of things, you can't open. So I'm wondering if you think just the normal conditional use permit process would be enough,
No.
in your opinion?
No,
okay,
I don't
and
think
why
it is.
not?
I was here for the American Apparel situation that, I don't know if any of you ever watched that, and there were quite a few people that were against it and quite a few people that were for it. I just think it's a good thing to have a public discussion when it comes to something like that.
Okay, so the conditional use permit process is a public discussion. It goes through the planning commission, it goes through the town council.
Okay.
And American Apparel, the formula retail was actually in place, if I understand it correctly, at that time.
And what was the additional, then what is the additional hoops they have to jump through?
I wasn't on the council at the time, maybe some others were, but the hoops are that you can't have too many. There's a presumption against the formula retail. It's defined in a certain way. It can't disrupt a mix. So what happens is you end up, what's happened, and Monica Renner will correct me, or Vice Mayor Spector, who was around at the time, will correct me. But American Apparel actually got turned down for a formula retail, which is Apple. So that all went through a process with a conditional use permit. But when you get a use permit, and if you're formula retail, there's a whole set of other considerations. So I'm wondering if you think it would be enough just to have the public process with the use permit and the discussion, rather than putting the entire other set of
I guess I don't know what
requirements
that
on.
other
Okay, so
set
you
is.
don't.
I'm sorry.
I'm asking the wrong person. Okay, that's
Sorry,
good
I
enough.
don't know what the
So,
other set
Vice
is.
Mayor Spector.
Thank you. I'm just going to try and make the question more clear. Do you think that with what we call formula stores, we should continue to have our conditional use permit?
Yes.
And do you have in your mind a certain number of stores that would make a business have to go through this process? 5, 7, 9, 15?
Well, I know right now it's at 7 and that you're proposing to go to 10. And I just didn't know if that was going to make a big difference for a Crate and Barrel to move in versus like I don't know, what other store chains that, the smaller store chains.
Okay.
So,
Thank you.
Sure.
Councilman Rennie.
Thank you, Mayor. I hope we're not wearing you out with questions. You mentioned earlier what I thought I heard you say. You were concerned if there was too many formula retail because rents would go up. Can you elaborate on that some?
Well, my location is down by Old Town, and that's become, mostly well, I guess actually they've got way more than 10 locations, so they're big box stores, right? My rent went up quite a bit. My building has been sold, I think, 3 or 4 times since I started renting there. I have actually pretty good rent, I have to say. I love my landlord. But I know that on North Santa Cruz had that happen, and they're paying way more than I am. And Gap did open up on North Santa Cruz. I know that it raised rents for some of my colleagues. It just happens because they can get more rent from the people that have more stores.
Okay,
It's
thank you.
just more demand.
Thank you for putting up with us. You can sit down now.
Thanks.
Alex Holt.
So, in front of you again, I don't know if I need to introduce myself again, do I? Good evening again. I just thought it would be really interesting to put some attention to the importance of whatever direction you guys choose to go with deregulating or even add more regulations on what's going to happen with Los Gatos. I think it's very, very important that we actually follow through with the rules. And if we set CUPs, we should not just set CUPs to clear our backs. We should actually set them and follow them to make Los Gatos better for a reason. Because the way it is now, there is restaurants that put up valet services without knowing really what the rules are. I'm not going to name any names. There is certain restaurants that have outdoor patios that call them employee seating area, but they serve meals there, and there is, I would say, a high majority of restaurants that have way too many seats than they're supposed to. And my point is, whatever direction you guys decide to go, there needs to be some kind of a system where everyone are, under the same, whatever the rules are, they should be followed, or there shouldn't be any rules. So my point is not to say start checking up on everyone. My point is let go of some of the rules, or at least make it easier to do business in Los Gatos, because we're gonna get more people that want to be here, and it's gonna be better for the people that live here, and everything will just be easier. At least so is my opinion.
Thank you. You're not going to get away with no questions. Councilwoman Sayoc.
And I just want to emphasize that we're asking all these questions because, this is the opportunity to ask people who are actually doing the business. And so I hope you don't feel uncomfortable with the constant barrage. But outdoor seating. So one of the issues that we're looking at is how we calculate seating. Traditionally, it's been attached to parking. And there are some other cities that attach it to square footage or the fire codes. What are your thoughts on how seating should be calculated And your rationale for that?
So seating, so whatever the number in the CUP is saying, if that number doesn't matter, what's the point of having it? That's the bottom line to me. So Manresa restaurant is considered one of the best restaurants in the world. If he could squeeze in 50 more tables there because the fire code said he could, would he? Probably not, or guaranteed not, because it's a very nice, fine dining restaurant, and he has exactly as many seats in his restaurant as he feels is perfect for his business. Same thing with the Pastaria. They are going to have, you know, great food, but not on the Manresa level of service where there's 16 people serving one dish. So for her, she can squeeze the people closer, and whether it says that she's allowed to have 8 seats or 30 seats, however many seats will be comfortable in her restaurant that's safe for people to move around according to ADA and all the other rules, that's what she's going to have. So I feel like you should not involve square footage, not involve parking, because if there's nowhere to park, people are either going to bike, they're going to walk, or they're going to look for parking, or they're not going to go. That's going to control how many people show up to Holt's every night. If there's no parking, there is not going to be any more people. So if I'm at 100 people a night or 200 people a night, it's not going to matter how many seats I have. What's going to matter is how are people going to get there. And I think fire marshals should have a lot of input depending on what's safe for the people. Does that answer your question? It does. Thank you.
Councilman Rennie.
Thank you, Mayor Jensen. Mr. Holt, so my question for you as a restaurateur, some of the things we're talking about are easing the restrictions on restaurants. I guess I would assume, and you can tell me if I'm wrong, that you wouldn't want the whole town to turn into restaurants, but we're talking about easing more specialty I don't want to use the word restaurant lightly, but what are your thoughts on the, I don't know if you've looked at it, the easing of the specialty restaurant kind of restrictions?
I think that it's the same practice. If people come up with a concept like, say, wine bar, as one of those kind of interesting topics, if that's something people want, that business is going to do well, and soon enough, 2 years later, another wine bar is going to open because the first one's doing so well. And if it's not doing well, then the first one's probably going to close. So it will naturally select itself. That's my opinion on it.
Hey, Mr. Holt, I have a question for you. You said that the town is going to have conditions, they need to enforce them, and that you would rather see something that's simplified. And so I'm wondering what form you would envision that taking. So, for example, some jurisdictions have a comprehensive ordinance that says, for example, you can have a restaurant, it stays open until 11 o'clock, you can serve alcohol, you can do whatever, and it's all just a set amount of rules, like 5 of them or whatever it is, or you can have outdoor seating as long as you don't block the sidewalk or whatever. Is that the kind of thing you envision, or do you envision something different?
It's hard to say exactly. I would have to do a little bit more research on an analyst on what I believe, but I think definitely simplify is the way to go, and whatever rules we do decide to go with should be fair and even, so that it's not one restaurant that's been in town and knows a lot of local people, they get to do whatever they want, and then the other restaurant that comes in that's new, that's going to open wherever the next restaurant's going to open, that they have all these problems and they can't do this, they can't do that. It needs to be simple and fair, and that way the best places will succeed and the not so good ones will go away.
Any other questions for Mr. Holt? Thank you very much.
Thank you. Good night.
Ginger Rowe.
So I'll talk for just a second about the outdoor dining, since we're kind of talking about dining, and I support that wholeheartedly because I feel like Los Gatos is getting very old in terminology of why people come down. I'm going to reiterate a little bit what they've said, but we want to sit outside. It's beautiful. It doesn't rain here, right? We need it, but it doesn't. So why not take advantage of that and let people sit outside and enjoy the view? And I hope that as a council, you guys taking consideration as what Mr. Holtz just said, not to make it so difficult for a small business to be successful, not to make so many rules and regulations, whether it be for retail or for dining. I also feel the formula, I'm concerned why it's going from 7 to 10. I would be interested to hear why that would be necessary to go from 7 to 10. I'm not sure it makes a huge difference, but I'm just curious. And I also feel that I tend to be an opponent of formula retail coming into town, but there has to be a balance. You do have to have some anchors to get more people here, to have a reason for them not to really have to leave town. My big concern is what's going to happen when, since North 40 is being approved, what's going to happen when that is open and all the I think they're called medium-sized boxes that we have in our community right now. What's going to happen to those? Because that's going to be new. It's going to have tons of parking. It's going to have tons of outdoor dining and outdoor seating and all new amenities. And I'm concerned that those medium box retailers are going to move and go there. And then what's going to happen? We're going to have these huge empty spots in our town. And what's going to happen to the small businesses? We struggle enough of it as it is against all the competition, including online. And so it's a constant moving, we're a constant moving target. So I hope that when you're making ordinance and changes that you keep in mind what's coming down the pipe, because overdevelopment really is the crux of all the evil in this town, whether it be parking, whether it be traffic on our streets, whether it be the movement of retail and restaurants. So just keep in mind that overdevelopment of this town, which seems to be unavoidable because it keeps happening with larger and larger developments, and the influx of students in our community and our schools. You know, I also have had a business here for 21 years and raised my kids here, and I see it at all aspects. So, okay.
Questions for Ms. Rowe? Thank you. Jim Foley.
Madam Mayor and Town Council, Jim Foley, 18400 Overlook Road, representing Rootstock Wine Bar.
You can even take that out.
Can I take it out? And McCarthy Ranch and some various other business interests in town. I'm glad that these topics have come up. It's some things that have been brought up over a number of years in different forums and really need to be talked about. And they need to be talked about all together. And I commend staff for actually putting this together and trying to outline some of the things and start the conversation about these items that are related. On the topic of formula retail and specialty retail, you know, I think that the way that I envision it is that the town council and the different deciding bodies that are put in place through the election process really should be looking at these things on a case-by-case basis. I think what happens a lot of times is they get caught up in the details of these rules and these numbers of how many should we have and what is the definition of this, and there's a lot of debate back and forth about what it should be or if it should or shouldn't be allowed. And I think what's really happening is we're kind of suffering in our central business district, and we need an influx of kind of new and vibrant businesses. And I think that kind of an easing or a relaxing or a different process to go through for some of these businesses where they're just evaluated on a case-by-case basis is a better way to go than to try to box them into a certain black and white definition. You'll hear from the community if there's a real concern that a mom and pop business is going to be threatened. People are going to show up here and they're going to let you know what their feelings are on that. Similarly, if there's something that somebody really wants in town, people are going to come out and support it. So I think that that's kind of the way to handle that. As far as outdoor seating and restaurant seats, I totally agree with what Mr. Holt said. I think that it should be just a safety regulation in general. I think that his point on what a restaurateur is going to have in his restaurant and how many seats that the customers are going to feel comfortable in is really, you know, up to that business, and it should be kind of a safety regulation that is controlling how many seats are in there and not has to do with parking. Parking is just going to be what it is, you know, in the town, and I'm glad that we're also addressing that through the new the parking program for the parking garage. Something that I noticed was not brought up in the report was discussion on ordinance 2021 and the traffic impact fee. I think that that's something that also should be a part of this conversation going forward in order to try to bring new businesses into town. That's it.
Let's see if there's questions for you. Councilman Rennie.
Thank you, Mayor Jensen. Mr. Foley, being a property owner in town, and I've had conversations with you before, and I consider to be kind of a moderate, balanced view. So my question for you is I'm trying to figure out how to ask it correctly, but how do we balance, I understand your statements about making the rules a little bit simpler to bring in some more formula retail, but I think you agree or have said that you don't think formula retail should take over the whole town. So how do we keep a balance of formula retail versus not formula retail? If we just open it up for free for all, how do you as a property owner not go for all the ones that are going to pay the most rent and squeeze out all the smaller ones?
Yeah, I understand the concern. I think the issue is we're looking at different points in time, and you can't always have every council meeting or each year kind of revisit this and try to adapt to what's going on. The landscape, as was mentioned earlier, the landscape of shopping is changing. And so I think that it should just be left up to whoever's in place at the time to sort of regulate if there's change that's necessary. And I think it's time now to have some change, because with these new entertainment districts that are popping up kind of around the valley and, particularly Campbell and some of these other places, we're having a hard time competing down here. So at this point in time, it needs to be kind of eased up on, okay, what can we do to attract new businesses? Does it mean it's formula? Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. Does it mean it's new restaurants that are replacing retail in the face of 2021? Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. And then as far as who's going to do it and who gets their share of the pie, I think that is something that the market has to dictate. So whether I'm the one or my neighbor or someone else, or I'm starting the business or it's another landlord, whoever is coming in and it's a suitable place for that business to be located, they've identified in the town, because that's what the market is bearing, then that's what should occur at that point in time.
Follow up. So we're talking about the rule right now that if you have non-formula, it's difficult to bring in formula, and you'd like us to ease up the rules so that some more formula can come in. I think you don't want all the non-formula to be replaced. And you talked about a process. What about the idea of a lottery? Say those property owners that had, let's say we allocate 5 per year we allow to change, and then there's a lottery. So for each a property owner that wanted to change could apply for the lottery or something. What do you think about some idea like that?
Yeah, I see where you're going with that. I think the issue with that is that you're trying to predict what is going to be, something that wants to locate in a particular location or a building that, what if I win that lottery, but I don't have a 5,000 square foot space? And that's the type of retailer that wants to come in at that point in time. Or conversely, I've got the 5,000 foot space, but there's a couple little 1,000, 2,000 foot uses that are new and interesting concepts that don't necessarily fit into the rules as they've been defined, but would be a benefit to the town. So at that point in time, I think the idea would be to look to these deciding bodies to make that decision and not be boxed in. I don't know if that answers your question, maybe.
Sort of. Thank you. I'll see if others have questions.
No questions. Councilwoman Sayoc.
Thanks. Mr. Foley, one of the things you said is the ability to look at things on a case-by-case basis. And so one can argue, well, that is the CUP process, but we've also heard the CUP process is quite cumbersome. So given that you've gone through it, what aspects are the cumbersome parts, but still retain the public hearing so that people can say, hey, that shop is going to ruin my business, and maybe that's not what we want in town? Like, how do I marry the two conflicting interests so that we have a process that is easier to get cool tenants in town, but yet some control mechanism to make sure we don't have certain bad stores in town?
Right. No, I think that's a really important question, and I think I don't know that I have the right answer to how to do it, because the way that it's occurring right now is it seems more often than not, a lot of these approvals are coming all the way to town council anyway. Some of them can get approved at the planning commission level, and I don't know if the suggestion is to make sure that they always come here, but you know, you guys are talking about creating rules and guidelines, and I'm, you know, trying to say maybe we don't need as many, but at the same time, those should be passed down with direction to Planning Commission, whether that's kind of the last stop for them. They're following the guidance of the people that we have elected at the time, and not necessarily a sheet of paper or a rule that was created 5, 10, or 20 years ago. That's kind of how I see the process working. And as to your question is what is challenging and what's difficult about it, I think that's just what it is. It's not that when I come in front of the town council and I'm asking for something, it's an interpretation and it's a determination of the rules that you guys are used to, and what have been implemented in the past. And that's, I think, where the details and the hang-up occurs, or when staff is putting together their report as to whether or not they can support it based on the guidelines that have been put in place, you know, then they're getting hung up on, well, we can't support this because this says this and this says this and this says that. Then we take it all the way through to this deciding body, and then everybody, you know, kind of looks at it at a bigger picture and decides whether or not it's a good thing for the town. So I think that mentality, whether or not it's a good thing for the town, is a place to start, and then trying to unwind that process to simplify it is kind of the next step. And I don't have a good answer for how to do that.
If I follow up. One of the other things that is being proposed for formula retail is to include restaurants, chain restaurants, like a Starbucks or a, I don't know, what else? Starbucks comes to mind. Your thoughts on that one?
Yeah, I mean, that's been brought up years ago as well. Again, I don't know. I think it should be, in my opinion, it would be better for everybody to look at it and to see if it's a good thing for the town. Is it a good thing to put in a Starbucks right next to Los Gatos Coffee Roasting Company? Probably not. I think that's pretty clear, right? But is there, I can't think off the top of my head, but there might be a, you know, formula type restaurant that is a new concept that is found in a lot of different places, that if you pass that would have a challenge coming into town that would not necessarily compete with anything that we have right now, but would add to bringing people down here, then you'd have a problem. And I can't think of one off the top of my head, but I know that there are some, and that's something that I'd like to see. I think it's been kind of reversed the way that things are occurring. People don't necessarily go shopping and then stop to eat at restaurants. People are shopping online, so they're going to come out and they're going to come to a very interesting dining and entertainment experience, and then they may shop. So since it's kind of reversed, we need to look at how we're going to capture that, and I think that's what a lot of the competing municipalities around here have been able to do, because they're allowing the new concepts to come in.
Councilman Leonardis, did you have your hand up?
Yes, thank you, Mayor Jensen. Mr. Foley, if you could take 5 things about downtown Los Gatos that seem to be holding us back, this invisible hand, and change those things, what would those 5 things be?
I think that one certainly that's been talked about for a long, long time is parking, and that appears to be being addressed. So I think that that's really good. I like all of the ideas on parking. I like the ideas of incorporating some element of valet, or allowing that to be able to be pursued by a business owner if they wish, as well as what the town's putting forward with the RFI process to understand if there's going to be able to be a partnership to build a garage. So that's one of them, and I'm glad that it's heading that direction. I think number 2 is just looking at this whole idea of controlling the types of businesses that are coming in to locate in our downtown, formula retail versus traditional retail versus specialty retail, and not complicating it. So whatever that overhaul may be to allow, the market balance to allow these businesses to come and locate in our downtown without having to go through a lot of hurdles. That will help us help our downtown compete with the other downtowns that are really successful right now. Number 3 would be kind of the seats tied to parking issue for the restaurants. I mean, when you look at it, it doesn't make any sense in my opinion, because nobody's going to run out and put a ton of more seats into their restaurants. And then we're going to get a bunch of more cars on the streets, taking up all the parking and jamming up and adding to, the already, beach traffic problem that we have. And then there's suddenly gridlock in Los Gatos. So that should simply be a safety issue, and we should be looking at parking separately, like what's going on. and allow the restaurants to, not be worried about what they can and can't do. And that goes hand in hand with outdoor seating. If it's safe for someone to have outdoor seating, let them have outdoor seating. It shouldn't really be that they've used up their allocation of seats, so that now they can offer something that they weren't able to offer before, which is in turn going to bring people, into our downtown for the dining and shopping experience. Number 4, I think I'm on, would be ordinance 2021, and looking at that, similar to formula retail, and deciding if there's a certain business that it makes sense to allow to come in and replace a retailer, because it's going to add vibrancy and vitality to the town. It's going to bolster other retail shops around. Find out if it makes sense to take a look at what we're doing with that, and either suspend it or modify it for the time being. And then the last part of it, which goes right on the tail of that, is the traffic impact fee. So let's say you do decide to do something with 2021 and you're going to allow a change of use. It is prohibitive to go ahead and go forward with that, because the traffic impact fee on that change of use is massive. We're going through a marketing effort on a particular property in downtown right now, and that's what we hear, because we've kind of said, hey, we're going to entertain any type of use, talk to us about it, and we'll go see what we could do. And the first question that comes up is, what is this traffic impact fee that I'm going to have to pay? If, for example, in the example that we were to do some kind of a restaurant that would replace a retail use. So they're all kind of tied together. It's kind of what I led with when I first started speaking, and I'm glad they're all being looked at together, but those would be kind of the 5 things. And I think that there's no secret, they're the ones that have been, or at least 3 of the 5 have been brought up in the staff report. Does that answer your question?
Thank you.
Vice Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Mr. Foley, if there was as you say, a loosening of allowing restaurants where there used to be retail, would we, the town, just allow that in every instance, in some instance? How would we gauge that? How would we balance that?
It is the most difficult part of the conversation, and all I come back to is it's on a case-by-case basis. And so, yeah, one day you may say that sounds like a good idea and that's great, and we think that that's going to help the town, and it's up to you or the other deciding body that's listening to the constituency coming up to say, yes, we agree, or no, we don't. And that may be different the next day, or for the neighbor of that property, or it could be different 6 months later because things have changed. And I think it's a snapshot in time, and we get too caught up in trying to lock something in place and then continually fit it in over time. So I don't know if that answers the question.
So would the snapshot be of the particular business, or would it be of the category? Like, all right, we council think that this retail store, small retail store, can be replaced by a restaurant. Are we looking at the type of restaurant, the type of retail store, or are we looking at the use?
Sorry, the use is different than the...
As opposed to a particular store, are we saying that store A should be replaced by restaurant B because restaurant B is really a great, cool restaurant and it's doing really well in San Jose? Or are we looking at just restaurant generally versus store generally?
I see what you mean, because you're also concerned about what happens if that restaurant fails and another restaurant comes in, so it's not particular to that one at that time. That's a risk that's always going to occur. I don't know, and I think Alex brought it up earlier too. There's the market's going to find the balance, and if it's unsuccessful, it's going to leave. And I know you want to maintain a control so that something that you weren't anticipating doesn't come in there. And that's the conversation that's brought up over and over again when granting a new use permit. I don't really have an answer for what to do there, but I would think that when the conversation comes up, and a lot of times it comes up and it's particular to a space in town, and there's an argument that's made, hey, there have been 4 or 5 businesses here that have failed. We'd like to try something else in this particular space, and then you run into the problem where it can't get supported because of the rules that are in place at that time. That's the type of circumstance where I think it would be beneficial to look at that and say, no, maybe we should try something else here. And how do you, allow that when you've got rules in place that have, before that time prevented that?
Thank you.
Councilman Rennie.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And I know we keep picking on you, Mr. Foley, but
Okay.
you have a lot of good ideas. And So let me give you an extreme scenario, and then maybe you can give some ideas how we keep it from happening. So if we, let it be known that it's now open season, that we can add more restaurants where there weren't restaurants, or more formula retail where there weren't formula retail, and the extreme scenario is all the property owners in town say, oh boy, I can charge more rent, and they raise rent on all of their non-formula retail. They start failing up and down the street. Pretty soon the street's empty. And, now we've made a significant change to the town instead of a little bit of a change to the town. And I think this is about an expectation. How do we change it a little bit without going to such an extreme scenario? And it's a little bit of you as a property owner. Well, if I raise rent on all the 20 people I have, am I really going to be able to replace them with 20 restaurants? Or how do we set an expectation that doesn't have an extreme scenario occur?
Yeah, it's the doomsday scenario, and it's one that I think about, when I'm thinking about putting myself in your shoes when you're trying to decide, what to do about that and how to formulate these regulations to prevent that from occurring. Personally, I think that is an unlikely scenario, that you're going to have such a run on national chain tenants just replacing everybody and putting everybody out of business quickly. I think that it's a much longer process due to, the different constraints that you have in place with, having use permits for some things, or, however you want to set it up to, grant the approval, from business license all the way up to having to get an alcohol approval and a use permit from council. If you start to see that issue occurs, then it's time to take a look at it again. And what is really happening? Is it something that the town citizens want to happen? Or is it something that's really harmful to some of those businesses that have been here for a long time, that we cherish, that want to remain here? And if that starts to happen, it should be pretty clear and pretty evident by the town citizens that really care about this town, that they'll come out and they'll defend that. You'll hear about it, and then you would relax your approval of, national, retail tenants. Also, it goes back into, and we talked a lot about this on the North 40, there's the sizing of different spaces and things downtown is a constraint. So in a certain point in time, there's plenty of spaces that are just not meant for that kind of a business. So I think that there's a lot of things that aren't going to have that doomsday scenario just sort of arrive at your doorstep when you start to maybe ease up on the rules.
Thank you for your thoughts.
Thank you very much, Mr. Foley.
Thank you.
Jason Farwell.
Good evening, Madam Mayor and council members. What a great list of topics to speak about. These are such critical issues to our town, and I commend Monica Wren for putting this together for you and the public. I think that I concur entirely with Mr. Foley. I think he did a great job of addressing a lot of these issues. So I don't want to be repetitive. I think the main issue that I consider when it comes to the formula issue is the ratio. This whole 80-20 percentage of 80% mom and pop, 20% formula retail. And I don't know exactly how that came to be. I don't think it's necessarily anywhere in writing, so to speak, but it's just kind of been this underlying policy that's been enforced by the council for a long time. And I'm not suggesting that we get rid of restricting formulas for coming in, but I think that at a minimum needs to be relaxed, and it needs to be relaxed in favor of some more formula to generate some more interest in our downtown. I go back to the North 40, and I've been pounding on this podium for what seems like 3 or 4 years now, that when that North 40 is developed, I see Apple leaving downtown. I see Apple leaving to go to the North 40. I know Grosvenor is talking to a lot of tenants downtown to try to get them to swing out to the North 40 once they're ready for that. I know that this is down the road, but these are things that we need to be worried about, and I'm terribly worried about losing Apple downtown. That would be devastating. That draw is very, very powerful. So I would like you to consider some different ratio or formula when it comes to the 80-20 and some type of relaxation there. As far as outdoor seating is concerned, I think it's a fabulous idea. In fact, I would even expand on that and would love to see rooftop seating. And I've mentioned that on a couple of occasions to some of you up here on the council. It creates some interesting issues as far as access and utilization of that space, but I think it would be a phenomenal addition to our downtown. We have all the beautiful mountains surrounding us, and if we can get people up on a rooftop safely to experience our downtown, I'd love to see that included. I think I'll leave it at that. You know, the last thing is I just don't want downtown to get any quieter than it already is. I think we need more folks down there having a good time. We are getting absolutely crushed by a lot of our surrounding communities. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Farwell. Let's see if you get as many questions as Mr. Foley. Councilwoman Sayoc.
So, Mr. Farwell, I want to talk to you about parking. The flip side I've heard from landowners who have buildings with parking credits is that they've paid into it, and if we eliminate this current system of tying seats to parking, it's not fair to those landowners that paid into it. So, given that you're a landowner that have paid this parking credit and have certain allocated seats, how do you feel about revisiting how we allocate restaurant seats, whether it's square footage or?
No issue with that, honestly. I mean, that parking assessment district has come and gone. I've been in favor of reenacting a parking assessment district. I would certainly be willing to participate in that process. But to the extent that there's some other, funding aspect for parking and then getting rid of tying parking to the allotment of seats for a particular use, so long as it's safe, I think that's the ultimate issue. I think if you go into most of these restaurants, it is a safe environment. Fire comes through typically on an annual basis to do their review. They look around, and if you're in violation and there's some safety issues, they note those, and you need to make the changes. So I think I don't have an issue with that. I would like to just see moving away from the parking seat issue to more of a occupancy safety issue.
Thank you.
Other questions? Thank you, Mr. Farwell.
Thank you.
Sean Luca.
Back again, and again, I won't be redundant. A lot of great people have spoken about what's going on. Yogurt and Love was a subject of CUP in 2021, and that was a long process, and that was a process that wasn't very clear because of the type of business Yogurt and Love was. And so when I talk about simplifying the CUP for a business standpoint, I look at some of these proposals of a restaurant drive-in or fast food, high turnover sit down, full service sit down. It's a lot. It's like, I look at it as, well, do you serve food? Well, you're a restaurant. If you don't serve food, then you're not. And I know there's those little things in the middle of, well, do you serve prepackaged food? I look at a 7-Eleven. But then you look at 7-Eleven and they also have a microwave, so you can take that burrito out and shove it in the microwave, and now you have hot food. So there's a lot of gotchas. Back when we went through the process, Monica Wren was great helping us through there. It is simplifying the process is a lot easier said than done. And what I've been listening to, it's like I had an idea and it's been crushed a couple times. I really do think when you look at retail, you've got this specialty retail. It really is, to me, it's kind of cut and dry. It's a restaurant or retail. Do you have a range hood? Are you cooking something? You're not. Okay, you're serving prepackaged food. So there's a prepackaged food, there's a microwave in there, which everyone has in their house. I don't see it as a big, huge fire safety concern outside of your normal, fire code. So to make it easier on Monica or on everyone else in the CUP process, I think the CUP process should stay. I think the making it easier when it looks at just a restaurant or retail and keeping it simple that way, instead of trying to designate everything, because as to Rootstock and other folks and these wine bars coming up, the business model is going to change, and trying to keep up with that, especially these days in the Silicon Valley, is really hard to do. And so instead of trying to define it, just keeping it simple. You're either selling clothing, right? Or a retail, definitely a retail establishment, or you're serving food. And just kind of keeping that simple. I'll go back to the seating as well. Seating was part of the CUP process and the concern there. And again, I fire code, and I look at restaurants, and I walk in, and in my head I kind of go, I wonder what your CUP said from a seating standpoint. But I agree. I don't see it overpopulated. I don't see the seating being so much that it's not safe. So that's all I have.
Thank you. Let's see if there's questions for you. Councilman Rennie.
I'm hesitating to ask this question. Thank you, Mayor Jensen, but trying to find a good way to ask it as usual. So you would like it simplified, and I think the reason your CUP was difficult was because, once upon a time it was fairly simple. You serve food, you're a restaurant. There was no restaurant there before you're out. So we actually made it complicated so we could bring you in.
Right.
So I don't know how this is a question, but maybe you can just respond, to my thoughts a little bit. So I'm unsure that going simple is the right way. What Monica's tried to do is define it better with maybe some more categories, so it's actually easier for a business like yours to come in versus just getting told no to begin with.
Right. Well, I think that's 2021, and a restaurant versus retail, right? So that whole 80-20 rule, or it was a retail establishment before. We can actually define you as a specialty retail and kind of squeak you in. That created a longer, drawn-out process, whereas it could have been, part of the CUP is, this is a restaurant coming in. I mean, I look at myself as a restaurant. I serve a type of food. That's what I look at myself as. So I hear what you're saying. I think the 2021 retail versus restaurant, and it was retail previously, hey, we're going to do this to get you in, which, by the way, I appreciate. Thank you very much. I'm not saying I don't appreciate that. But to keep it, simple, to designate it's a restaurant or retail, and then to come back to the 2021 and look at that ratio of what's the good mix. I'm not a huge proponent of bringing large box retail people into the downtown area. I think Los Gatos Boulevard and that Blossom Hill area seems to be a good mix. Kind of keeping the quaintness of the downtown, and I've been going to Mountain Charlie's as long as I could get in the front door. So those little things that you remember about the downtown, you want to kind of keep. It's a kind of a keepsake. Those other things that change outside of the downtown perspective, I don't think would necessarily create a huge issue, if you kept it where it's at right now. So.
Thank you.
So, Mr. Luca, I'm sort of going to get your opinion or see if you agree or disagree. Part of the issue, of course, with your business was that we didn't have anything to call it.
Right.
Because we define retail in one of our codes, and it includes food. And then somebody way back when in the planning department wrote a memo that called something specialty retail, that put different. So in keeping with Mr. Holt's comments and other people's comments about, how we might go about doing this. I just want to see what you think about another community that shall remain unnamed that has a code section that says, okay, here's what you can do in the downtown. And one of the paragraphs is restaurants, subject to the provisions of paragraph blah for alcohol sales. And if you have live entertainment, subject to whatever. Is that the kind of thing that you'd be looking for simplification?
Yeah,
or do you think that it
absolutely.
should be something different?
No, that's right on target. I mean, you're going to have music or you're not going to have music. Again, the market's going to dictate what kind of restaurant's going to be there, what's going to succeed, what's not going to succeed. So really, I look at it as not only making it easier for the business person, but for the town council as well. I really do feel like if you build it and keep it simple, that less of it will come to your desk and it'll be, on the planning department to approve and not approve. I kind of go back to Councilman Rennie's comments of, well, we try to accommodate you and get you in, and I appreciate that. But back to, if the process was simplified, the restaurant, you serve alcohol, you don't serve alcohol. Those kind of big, you have a range hood or a fire hood, you're cooking in there, that's probably one big designation as well, right? So if you're cooking or you're not cooking, we don't cook. We don't serve alcohol. So there's, those three kind of big designations. I think you could cover a lot of restaurants that way. I like the idea.
Other questions? Thank you very much.
Great, thank you.
I don't have any other speaker cards. Does anybody else want to talk to us about this? Well, you already talked. We got your comments, so thank you very much. I suspect very much that we are going to have more discussions on this, so watch your calendars and see when it comes up, and we'll take your comment then. Anybody new who hasn't talked to us? Okay, I'm going to close the public portion of the hearing. And actually, before we start a discussion and figure out what we're going to do now that it's 10 minutes till 11, I just wanted to thank all the business people that came out to talk to us. I know that it's difficult for you to come out and that we've encouraged you to come out before and that, it's hard to do and sit through meetings. So I want to really thank you because your input on this subject is really important to us, as you can tell from all the questions that we got. So thank you very much for coming. So with that, I'm going to look to the council and determine how we want to go forward, because what we're doing here is hopefully giving direction. Obviously, we've gotten a lot of input. We have a lot of questions. There's complicated issues for us to figure out. I'm going to start with the suggestion and then see what other people's suggestions are. My suggestion was going to be to ask staff to compile those things that they've heard as concerns into categories with formula retail, with CUPs, outdoor seating, tying seating to parking requirements, etc., and hopefully summarize and bring that back to us so we can put it on another agenda where we can have a very focused discussion about how we want to proceed with that, would be my suggestion, and I'm certainly open to other and better suggestions from the council. Vice Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. No better suggestions, but an editor, I think this is actually a very good idea to have staff come back to us with basically this summary. I would ask that in addition to that, a process be outlined if it applies. These are the things that we heard tonight, and these are the various processes that the council could go through to effect a change if that is the direction we were going. For example, it may be that the council could just raise 3 hands and we could change stuff. Or it could be that it needs to go back to the Planning Commission. I don't think anything here goes to the General Plan Committee. But in addition to the substantive outline here, I would also like it to be accompanied by a process outline.
Other suggestions or additives to my suggestion, because I'd be willing to convert that to a motion and incorporate the Vice Mayor's comments. Councilman Leonardis.
Thank you, Mayor Jensen. As I look at the category of outdoor seating, there's places in town where it can actually go, and there's places where the sidewalk is too narrow. when I look at these other communities that have upped their outdoor seating and added things like sofas and nice tables and umbrellas and all these kinds of things, it's not necessarily in the vicinity of a restaurant all the time. So I think some kind of an outdoor seating study with our existing configuration would be interesting to look at. Where can it actually go? Where it will not disrupt the flow of pedestrians. And then there was the discussion of market forces, more parking. Those, I think, are going to be addressed in our strategic goals. Seats to parking has always been of interest to me. I think that is kind of an outmoded rule that is followed, and I think that it's probably largely not being obeyed or enforced anyway. So those are my comments.
Okay, so I just want to make clear that I am converting what I had said earlier with respect to the staff bringing us back things with the mayor's comments. And my motion was really intending to focus what comes back to us on these categories that we've talked about tonight, not going all into studies and this and that and the other thing. I appreciate the councilman's remarks, but my motion was intended to focus us on these issues and what we've had tonight.
And I'll second that motion.
Okay, thank you. Councilman Rennie.
Thank you, Mayor Jensen. I'm not sure whether I'm staying within the bullets you're asking for, but my thoughts are, if I can go out on a limb a little bit here, I hear a lot of people asking questions about how do we maybe ease up the 80-20 rule, or and also simplifying the process but not letting it get out of control. So if I could go out on a limb and say it'd be nice if staff maybe would come back with some thoughts or recommendations in those two areas.
That's fine. They can certainly do that. And I wrote a note to myself to ask Ms. Wren, why 10 versus 7? And maybe next time we consider that, you can bring that information back to us and what impact that would have. And you're nodding at me. Sorry? There's a quick response. Ms. Wren.
So we did some benchmarking with other California cities who have these policies in place, and we were actually at the very most restrictive end with the 7. Most of them are 10, 11, and 12. It was merely a suggestion to follow the trend. That's also why the restaurants were added in there. It was just a suggestion.
Okay, great. Thank you. Councilwoman Sayak.
I'm going to support the motion, but a lot of great things were said today, and I want to make sure that even though we're going to focus specifically on these 3 topics, that we don't lose a lot of the great discussion we heard, and that we capture it in this economic vitality plan that we're all excited about. And hopefully we can continue this conversation. I think we had, as evidenced by the questions, we have a lot more areas that I think we can have more discussion on, especially as we start getting drafts out to see, does this make sense? Are there unintended consequences? And I look to staff to see how we can have those conversations continue as these subjects progress. So.
Thank you. I actually have a question for staff with respect to making sure that the conversation continues. Because we started this as a public hearing, can we continue it to a date certain so that people that are here and are interested know when we're going to consider it again?
We could certainly do that. This isn't formally a public hearing. It's more other business since we don't have an actual ordinance before you tonight. But I'm sure our community would very much appreciate knowing when we might be back. And just looking ahead with the September 15th date, I would suggest a date in October.
And so I am, unless you make a face at me, going to add to my motion that we continue this till October 6th and see if the seconder is agreeable to that.
I gather it's okay with the staff? All right, yes, that's fine with me.
Okay. All right, so any other discussion on the motion? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? So those of you interested, please check our agenda for October 6th and show up or give us your thoughts in writing. Either one we'd appreciate. So thank you very much, all of you, for coming, and we are adjourned this evening.